Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Chiara Poggi. Chiara Poggi was born in Vigai, Italy, on March 31, 1981. She studied economics and landed a job as a financier at a large company. She was a delicate girl with expressive blue eyes. She was determined to advance her career and become a manager, with the ultimate goal of starting her own business. To achieve this, she focused on her studies and graduated. Alongside her professional ambitions, Chiara also wanted to start a family. At that time, she had been in a relationship with a man named Alberto for 7 years. Unfortunately, all her dreams seemed to stop there, as fate had other plans for her. On August 13, 2007, at approximately 9:12 a.m., Chiara was going about her daily routine when someone knocked on her door. She opened it, unaware that this decision would lead to her death just a few hours later. At 1:50 p.m., Alberto called the Italian emergency services, 118, to report a tragedy at his girlfriend's home. Alberto had discovered Chiara's body. He explained that he had visited and found her lying in a pool of blood. When the dispatcher asked if he could help the victim, Alberto said he couldn't bear to look at the scene and had already left to contact the police. He provided the address and implied that his girlfriend was already dead when he called. When asked why he did not wait for the police at the scene, the Alberto explained that the house was located on a dead-end street, making it hard for the police to find. He decided to go to the police himself and bring them to the tragedy scene to prevent confusion. The Carabinieri arrived after being directed by the emergency services dispatcher. All the doors of the house were locked, so the officers had to climb over the fence. Once inside the kitchen, they discovered signs of a struggle. The Chiara seemed to have been attacked while cooking. Dishes were scattered, and there were open boxes containing a knitting needle, which suggested a confrontation might have taken place. The police also found initial evidence of a violent crime. There were drops of blood on the floor. And in the room near the exit, they discovered a potholder and white slippers that were later confirmed to belong to the Chiara. The Carabinieri entered the next room and discovered Chiara lying face down on the steps near the basement entrance. She appeared to have been taken by surprise, as she was still wearing her pink summer pajamas. Chiara showed signs of a severe beating. It seemed she had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, likely a hammer. The police officers quickly spotted important evidence in the pool of blood, a strand of hair that obviously did not belong to Chiara and a distinctive shoe print left in the dried blood. The lack of warmth in the Chiara's body suggested that she had been killed a few hours earlier. The police quickly contacted Chiara's parents. Rita, the mother, was on vacation in Trentino and had missed the call. She called back around 3:30 p.m. and was so distraught by the news that she nearly fainted. She rushed back to the city. When Rita arrived at the police station, her husband, Giuseppe, Chiara's father, was there. Nicola Stassi, Alberto's father, was also there when his son was brought to the station. Alberto called his father for support. Alberto, 20, shared his story of events with the police by the time Chiara's parents arrived. Alberto said he called Chiara at 9:45 a.m., but she did not answer. He was not concerned at first, thinking she might still be asleep. After noon, he made several attempts to contact her on both her cell phone and her home phone, but received no response. At 11:15 a.m., he decided to go play golf. After returning from his match at around 12:30 p.m., Alberto found all of Chiara's doors locked and she was not answering his phone calls. Worried, he climbed over the fence and tried to open the door, but it was locked. He then broke in through the kitchen window, the only way into the house. Inside, he found the TV on. At first, he thought Chiara might still be asleep in her room. However, when he could not find her, he went into the kitchen and saw drops of blood on the dishes. He then went into the living room, where he discovered her body, leaving him in shock. It's strange that he didn't approach Chiara to check on her or try to help. Instead, he ran to get the investigator. At that moment, she was still alive, and she might have been saved. Rather than ensuring his girlfriend was okay or providing first aid, he left the house and headed to the police station. Once in the car, he called for an ambulance. During the police interrogation, they noticed his odd behavior and questioned why he didn't check if the girl was breathing. Instead of helping her, he just ran away and called the police. Alberto explained that he was scared and confused, which led him to call for help right away. However, he could have stayed, called for medics, and waited for the ambulance while performing CPR. He claimed he left because he felt unsafe in the house after the attack and sought protection from police. The Alberto spent the entire day at the police station, and around midnight, he was getting ready to meet with the police again to answer their questions. Meanwhile, forensic experts were carefully examining the crime scene and were puzzled by a footprint found in a pool of the Chiara's blood. They asked Alberto to show them his shoes. He was wearing special white golf shoes that were spotless. He claimed he had been wearing them when he arrived at his girlfriend's house. However, this raised suspicions because the floor around the body was covered in blood. How could someone walk around in such a bloody scene without getting any blood on their shoes? There wasn't a single drop of blood on the soles, and the Alberto couldn't provide a clear explanation for this. The police decided to question Alberto about his relationship with Chiara, the murdered girl. Alberto described their relationship as wonderful, claiming they had very few problems. Like any couple, they occasionally argued, but these conflicts were minor and quickly resolved. The police then asked him for more details about the events leading up to her death to help establish a timeline and identify any suspicious activity. However, Alberto offered no significant information. The police took his fingerprints and ultimately released him due to a lack of evidence, keeping him at the police station for just under a day. Finally, around 7 a.m., Alberto got into his father's car and went home. On August 17th, when police examined the search history and files on Alberto's computer, he claimed he woke up early that morning, around 9 a.m., and was working on his thesis while trying to call his girlfriend, after which he went to play golf. Evidence confirmed that he was home, fed his dog, and then left the house. Although it seemed that Alberto had an alibi, the police remained suspicious. The police continued their investigation to reconstruct the timeline of the attack. They were particularly focused on how the crime occurred and still needed to identify the murder weapon. Based on the condition of the Chiara's body, it appeared the attacker used a metal object, possibly something like a hammer with a pointed end or an ice pick. At that point, the forensic report indicated that Chiara was likely murdered between 9 and 10 in the morning. When the police examined the prime Alberto's mobile phone records, they discovered that his mother called him daily just before 10 a.m. Elizabeth, the mother, confirmed that she spoke to her son that day to check on a friend, seemingly validating his alibi and suggesting he could not have committed the murder during that time. However, upon further investigation of the call logs, the police found that the mother did not call her son that day, raising suspicions. Alberto's motives are unclear. Friends confirmed that Chiara and Alberto had a wonderful relationship, with only minor disagreements that are typical of any young couple. A friend named Marco saw Alberto the day after the tragic event and noticed that Alberto seemed distressed. He refused to eat and spoke very little, often expressing his deep sadness over Chiara's death. Meanwhile, the investigation was progressing. The police had gathered preliminary investigation materials, autopsy reports, and numerous witness testimonies about the couple. After August 20th, forensic experts continued analyzing the evidence, including hair found in a pool of blood that did not belong to the Chiara. They also examined materials collected from under Chiara's fingernails. Additionally, several blood splatters were discovered in the house that did not seem to match Chiara's, suggesting they might belong to the assailant. On the morning of August 22nd, Alberto visited the police station to obtain some documents. He spent a few hours speaking with the police, who were hoping to gather new information from him. Additionally, at 2 p.m., Alberto was scheduled to take part in an interrogation with the prosecutor present. With police showing increased interest, the Alberto was preparing for his meeting with his lawyer. By this time, Alberto had already spent over 26 hours at the station, providing the police with all the information they requested. He repeated his account of the events from August 13th. But the police were more focused on the evening of the 12th, the night before the bloody massacre took place. That night, the couple ordered 2 pizzas from a nearby restaurant and spent the evening eating and watching TV. Alberto then went home. Police scrutinized every detail of his statement for any inconsistencies, especially questioning why Alberto left after dinner. Throughout the investigation, Alberto repeatedly maintained that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend Chiara's death. The prosecution remained skeptical. He questions why there was no blood on Alberto's white sneakers as he moved around the house. Was he really that cautious? Why did Alberto leave on the night of the 12th instead of staying with Chiara? And why did he not help her when he found her unconscious? Unexpectedly, Chiara's neighbor provided some information. At around 9 a.m., she noticed a bicycle parked near the entrance to Chiara's house. As a cyclist, she found this strange, as she had never seen Chiara or Alberto riding such a bicycle. Later, the bicycle was spotted near Chiara's fence. The neighbor, who was knowledgeable about bicycles, realized that it was a women's model equipped with unusual accessories not usually found on regular bicycles. The woman did not think about what would happen next. She looked out her window around 10 o'clock or 10:30 a.m. and noticed that the vehicle was no longer by the neighbor's fence. This information caught the police's attention, as it might be an important clue. The police realized that finding this bike could significantly advance their investigation, as locating the owner might lead them to the killer. However, their search for this type of bike hit a dead end because the description provided was too vague. Later, another neighbor, a 47-year-old woman, contacted the police. She reported seeing a bike near Chiara's house at 9:30 a.m. and confirmed it was a women's model with a new color, although some details did not match. It's possible that one of the neighbors had remembered those details incorrectly. Meanwhile, over several days, several lawyers defended Alberto, including his brothers, Giulio and Giuseppe Colli, who worked in the Vai Giovanna Bar Association. However, by this time, the police had discovered the complicated love story between Chiara and Alberto. The love between the Chiara and Alberto was genuine, and their relationship was going well. This was evident to those who knew them and was reflected in their frequent exchanges of affectionate messages. They hardly ever argued, and when they did, the disagreements were minor and quickly resolved. However, in the week leading up to the incident, some unusual changes were observed in their relationship. It seems that Chiara has recently stopped wanting to see Alberto, and they have started sleeping in separate rooms even when he stays overnight. Alberto attributes this behavior to the fact that he prefers to sleep in a double bed in Chiara's brother's room, where he finds it more comfortable. There were very few photographs of the couple together, raising concerns about their relationship. Instead, the Alberto's secret folder contained hundreds of photos of women's feet in shoes, leading to suspicions that the couple's seemingly happy exterior was hiding deeper issues. This raised the question, could Alberto's unusual fetish have been connected to the murder? The case took a dramatic turn 43 days after Chiara's death, when police discovered Alberto's sister's bicycle, matching a neighbor's description. Blood was found on the pedals, which was later confirmed through laboratory testing to be Chiara's. However, Alberto's sister had a solid alibi, as she was at work at the time of the incident. Initially, Alberto was believed to have borrowed his sister's bicycle. The family and the community were shocked. They did not believe Chiara's boyfriend was guilty until the very end. However, when traces of her DNA were found on the pedals of the bike, they had no choice but to accept his guilt. Relatives were also shocked by Alberto's behavior. He met with them several times after the tragedy and still steadfastly maintained his innocence. The parents displayed clear signs of their grief. The lawyer passionately defended his client, trying to explain the presence of the Chiara's blood on the pedals, despite the significant amount found, which was not just a few drops. The defense attempted to dismiss this evidence by suggesting it could be related to menstruation and other implausible theories. Ultimately, despite these efforts, Alberto was arrested. On September 28, the judge reviewed the case file and determined that there was not enough evidence against the suspect, leading to Alberto's immediate release from prison. The case file was then sent back to the prosecution for further examination. Police had found a significant amount of specific pornographic material on the Alberto's computer. They believed that his girlfriend might have discovered his secret fetish, which could have caused tension between them. A conflict arose, and this seems plausible considering that on August 12, the day before the incident, the Alberto had been working on his laptop at Chiara's place and had left it there, giving her access to the stored information. Alberto had many photographs of women's shoes that he seemed to have taken himself, particularly during a recent trip to London shortly before his relationship with Chiara started to decline. Additionally, there were images capturing private moments between the Chiara and Alberto. These photos were blurred, but the girl appeared to be quite embarrassed in them. It's possible that the Alberto's specific preferences in intimacy contributed to their disagreements. Alberto acknowledged that he has certain fetishes, but he claimed that the Chiara always accepted, and it never caused any issues between them. On November 3, 2008, Alberto was charged once more. Police believed they had sufficient evidence to link him to Chiara's murder. It was clear that the Alberto knew the victim well, as he had unrestricted access to her home. This was supported by the fact that nothing was broken or stolen, and the Chiara was found wearing her home clothes. The strongest evidence was a footprint found in the Chiara's blood. It was a size 42 shoe print that matched the Alberto's foot size. After committing the crime, Alberto replaced his old shoes with a brand new pair that he wore during his first interrogation. Despite blood prints being found on the bicycle pedals, he persisted in denying any involvement. It seems he successfully disposed of the sneakers he wore when he left the Chiara's house after the murder. On February 24, 2009, during the preliminary hearing, the prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence. Although they had initially requested a life sentence, after reviewing the case documents, the judge determined that further improvements were needed. He identified many of the evidence as being implausible. Extensive research was conducted, including a reconstruction of the events using computer models. A comprehensive model of Chiara's house was built, allowing the police to track the killer's movements. On August 13, 2009, a detailed report was submitted to the court. According to this report, the Alberto turned on his computer at 9:35 a.m. and viewed several pornographic photographs. He continued this activity until 12:20 p.m. and identified only 3 possible time intervals during which the murder could have occurred. The house alarm was deactivated at 9:12 a.m., and there is no information about Alberto's activities between then and 9:35 a.m. The second time window for the murder was from 12:20 p.m. to 12:46 p.m., as the Alberto called Chiara's mobile phone from his home shortly after 12:46 p.m. There was also a time frame available for the murder from 12:46 p.m. to 1:26 p.m. The forensic expert determined that the Chiara likely died between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, suggesting that the earlier time frame was more plausible. Meanwhile, the defense pointed out several mistakes made by the police during the investigation. The forensic expert noted that evidence was mishandled. There were numerous errors and inconsistencies, including the failure to collect the Chiara's fingerprints. Police also did not investigate other people who may have used the bicycle seen near Chiara's house, which weakened the prosecution's case. Additionally, the provisional time frame established suggests that Alberto had no more than 23 minutes to commit the crime, set up the scene, escape, and dispose of the shoes. Alberto lived a mile from Chiara's house, and if he had been able to ride his bicycle to Chiara's house, it would have been physically difficult and inconsistent with the timeline of events. Despite this, the prosecution believed he could have done so. On December 17th, the judge left the courtroom to consider his verdict. The prosecution asked for a 30-year prison sentence. However, they failed to present convincing evidence of his guilt. There were no bloody shoes, video footage, witness testimony, or obvious motives linking Alberto to the murder. Ultimately, the judge found Alberto not guilty. The verdict shocked the local community, which had expected a different outcome and labeled Alberto a murderer. However, the case did not end there. Chiara's family filed an appeal on November 8, 2011, leading to a new trial. This hearing lasted several weeks, during which the public and media were barred from the courtroom, allowing journalists only to enter when the decision was announced. The court acquitted the Alberto Stasi once more during a retrial on April 18, 2013. The lawyer emphasized that the charges lacked grounding and that there was insufficient evidence. He also argued that it would have been impossible for Alberto to commit the murder and cover up the evidence in just 23 minutes. Following the death of Alberto's father, who was killed in a Pavia hospital on April 9, 2014, a new phase in the investigation began. This phase included various pieces of evidence, such as computer modeling and a thorough analysis of a bicycle found in the Alberto's home. Unexpectedly, during this investigation, Alberto confessed to murdering Chiara. The case was so complex that without this confession, he likely would have been acquitted again. However, under public pressure, he ultimately admitted his guilt. On December 17, 2014, 37-year-old Alberto Stasi received a 16-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €1 million in compensation to the Chiara's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In our story today, we'll talk about a rare snake that suddenly attacked its owner, ending his life. Ben Renk was just 29 years old when he was found deceased in his renowned snake breeding facility. Benjamin Blue Birch Renk was born in August 1987 in Missouri. He grew up in the countryside alongside his family. Ben had an older brother, Sam, with whom he shared a very close bond. In 1989, the Renk family moved to a picturesque farmhouse. The boys spent a lot of their time outdoors, and it was then that Ben began to take an interest in snakes. A tragic incident in September 1992 triggered a series of unfortunate events. The family was away when a gas leak occurred, leading to an explosion in their beautiful home. The Renks were forced to move into a trailer. After some time, Ben's mother Kim was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Despite these hardships, the family overcame them. They were very close-knit and always supported each other in any situation. Recovering from previous tragedies, in 2002, they moved to a new home where a special room was designed for Ben to keep his snakes. In 2009, after a long battle with cancer, Kim passed away. Before her death, she made her sons promise to look after the farm and pass it on to their children. As time went by, Ben's love for snakes knew no bounds, and the young man founded Rennick Reptiles, which soon gained recognition. This allowed him to sell snakes worldwide, from the United Kingdom to Japan. Breeding snakes became the meaning of his life. He was described as a great breeder who was devoted to his work, caring more about the snakes than the money. The reptile farm bred a multitude of reptilian subspecies, growing and reproducing both the most common species and some of the rarest subspecies on Earth. Ben's reptiles were of immense value. Just a portion of his python collection was valued at over $1 million. Ben was a solitary man who had long aspired to start a In 2010, at a party, he met a woman named Linley. Their relationship moved forward quickly. Within weeks, Ben introduced his girlfriend to his brother Sam and Sam's fiancé, Eli. Eli and Linley had sons from previous relationships, so they found common ground quickly and became friends. Linley soon became part of the Renk family. The couple began living together. Linley helped Ben at the snake breeding farm. They were in love and lived as a full family. In March 2012, Linley gave birth to their daughter Amelia. Ben was thrilled to become a father. However, the happy family life faced challenges again. Frank Renk, Ben's father, encountered significant business troubles. Previously, he had engaged in fraudulent stock transactions to cover medical bills and Kim's treatment expenses. Just a day before the FBI planned to visit the farm, Frank took his own life. Frank's passing halted the investigation. The sons were deeply affected by another parental loss, but managed to pull through by supporting each other. Ben inherited the house and farm, while Sam received an amount of money far exceeding the house's value. Each brother had their own family and children, but this didn't stop them from living as one big family in their parents' home. They lived together harmoniously, with Sam spending his inheritance on repairing the farm without hesitation. Initially, things were fine, but soon financial disputes caused friction between the brothers after their father's death. Ben focused on his business and family and decided to formalize his relationship with Linley on April 14, 2014. They married officially, adding Linley as a full-fledged member of the Renk household. Ben and Linley also opened a second business, a spa named Essentia Spa Inc., but it faced financial difficulties under Linley's management. Financial issues often led to arguments between them, despite Linley's hard work being insufficient to cover all salon expenses consistently. At the same time, Sam and his wife faced significant financial challenges. Ben allowed them to sell some of the furniture of the house. Linley disapproved, leading to a rift between the families. The relationship was irreparably damaged. Ben decided to improve the family's financial situation by arranging to sell some rare reptiles for a significant sum. However, the deal fell through due to a tragedy that occurred on the farm. On June 8, 2017, Linley walked into one of the farm's barns. There, on the floor in a pool of blood, lay Ben. Linley called her brother Sam for help and dialed the emergency number. She reported that she had found her husband unconscious on the ground. During the conversation, Linley dropped the phone and ran outside. Sam continued the conversation and confirmed that his brother was dead. Sam suggested that a snake might be to blame for what had happened. Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were called to the snake breeding facility for the first time in a long while. Law enforcement officers were afraid to enter the farm, facing over 3,000 snakes, and having to conduct an examination of a man lying in blood, wary of a possible attack from a deadly viper believed to be the assailant. However, when coroner Dave Colbert arrived and took a closer look, he discovered a shell casings on a shelf at eye level. This was something far more sinister than a venomous snake bite. Shell casings were found near the body, but no weapon was discovered. The assailant had shot Ben multiple times in the back and head. None of the relatives heard shots or saw the attacker. Sam and Linley were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. Linley suggested that Sam might be involved in her husband's death, even citing a motive. Apparently Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was opposed. Sam was asked to undergo a lie detector test, which he passed. The police had no reason to detain Linley and Sam, so they were released. The investigation into who might have wanted Ben Renk dead began with various theories proposed, the first being robbery. But it remained unconfirmed as none of the rare snakes were missing and all valuable items remained untouched. Just days after Ben's demise, police interrogated Linley again and tested her hands and clothing for gunpowder residue. However, results came back negative. Following her husband's funeral, Linley ceased communication with Sam and Eli altogether. She sold her husband's business, inherited the house, and sought to claim a life insurance payout for Ben worth $1 million. After receiving the insurance money, Linley planned to sell the Rennick family home for $740,000. Sam's family was notified about the eviction. Discovering the rapid insurance claim and business sale following her husband's passing, Sam Rennick suspected his brother's wife in the tragic event. Sharing his suspicions with investigators, Linley was called in for another interrogation. There, she admitted to having complex relations with Ben and occasionally meeting with a man named Eric. Eric had an alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. Linley's admissions were startling. It turned out about 3 years after their marriage was officially registered, she was unfaithful to Ben with at least 2 different men. Messages between the couple showed that Ben suspected his wife of infidelity, which had indeed strained their relationship lately. On October 5, 2017, the Missouri State Highway Patrol conducted a polygraph test on Linley and informed her that she had failed it. However, without solid evidence linking her to the crime, she was released. Nevertheless, the investigation into Ben Rennick's case slowed but did not cease. Later investigators learned that a month before Ben Rennick's passing, Linley had made her first attempt on his life. She concocted a story of Ben being a cruel tyrant who oppressed her daily and even physically assaulted her. She shared this story with a spa salon co-worker to garner support and assistance. They plotted to end Ben's life by giving him a poisonous protein shake laced with 15 Percocet pills. Unaware, Ben drank it. He fell severely ill during that period but survived, oblivious to having been poisoned. Linley Rennick was interrogated by investigators 6 times in total, and further assistance in the investigation came unexpectedly. On January 14, 2020, information from a state prison emerged. A witness claimed to know about Ben Rennick's death. The witness was Brandon Blackwell. He told Missouri State Highway Patrol investigators that Linley had shot Ben and conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon mentioned that he had dated Linley while she was married to Ben. 1.5 years after Ben's death, they had a child together, but by 2019, they had separated. Brandon claimed that Linley confessed to the act and conspired with her spa salon co-worker, Ashley Shaw, and another ex-boyfriend, Michael Humphrey. Years after Ben's demise, Linley Rennick and her former boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, were arrested for his death. However, following their arrest, Linley and Humphrey pointed fingers at each other. So who really pulled the trigger? According to Michael's testimony on the day of the event, he went to the farm with Linley, who asked him to pose as a buyer. He put on gloves and was supposed to shoot Ben, but couldn't do it. Eventually, Linley took the gun and shot her husband herself. The investigation into Ben Rennick's death continued for 3 long years. On January 16, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Linley Rennick, Michael Humphrey, and Ashley Shaw. Ashley was offered immunity in exchange for her cooperation and testified against her boss. The former spa salon employee shared that Linley had complained about her husband and convinced her to assist in a plan. She claimed that Ben was constantly belittling, demeaning, and even physically harming her. Fearing divorce would lead to Ben gaining custody of her children, Linley decided to eliminate him. Planning together to poison him with a lethal cocktail during questioning, Linley and Michael accused each other of Ben's demise. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey faced trial in Ain County. His lawyers hoped that revealing the murder weapon would lead to a second-degree murder charge. Despite possessing the gun, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it. To lessen his sentence, Michael Humphrey made a deal with the prosecution by disclosing the location of the murder weapon. His cooperation led to a life sentence on a less severe charge of second-degree murder without defense at the trial. On January 3, 2021, Michael Humphrey was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. The against Linley Rennick began on December 6, 2021. She was charged with the shooting and demise of Ben Rennick on June 8, 2017, at his snake breeding facility in New Florence. Court documents stated that the plot to end Ben Rennick's life originated in Linley's spa salon. The probable cause statement mentioned that Ben was aware of Linley's financial troubles and that Linley feared Ben could take her children away. This led her to fabricate a story of domestic abuse. The first attempt to end Ben Rennick involved a protein shake laced with narcotics. Search warrants for Ben and Lindley Rennick's Facebook accounts confirmed the protein shake story and Ben's awareness of Lindley's financial issues. The court hearing detailed the events of the day when Ben Rennick was killed, fully reconstructing the sequence of events through cross-examination. On the day of the incident, Michael Humphrey picked up Lindley from the spa salon, while Shaw sent text messages from Lindley's phone inside the spa to conceal their true location and mislead the investigation. According to court documents, Humphrey intended to end Ben's life but asked Lindley to do it. After firing shots, Humphrey collected most of the casings, but missed some in his haste. He also disposed of Lindley's clothing after returning to the spa, where Lindley took a shower, which helped avoid detection of gunpowder residue on her hands and clothes. Defense attorney Catherine Barreur asked Lindley Rennick to share her personal and family history, education, relationship with ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey, work history, and the lead-up to her marriage with Ben Rennick. This was aimed at portraying her as a victim of domestic violence. However, no evidence of such violence was found, undermining this defense narrative. Michael Humphrey was part of a group that allegedly planned to end Ben Rennick's life. Lindley Rennick described her relationship with Humphrey as codependent, involving his drug dealing and her addiction. She ended her relationship with Humphrey at the end of 2010, according to previous witness statements, but reconnected with him about a month before Ben Rennick's death. Lindley Rennick firmly denied the prosecution's allegations regarding the alleged plans to end Ben Rennick's life. This included the supposed failed attempt to poison Ben with a protein shake containing narcotics. The couple faced financial and marital difficulties. The spa center wasn't doing well, and contractual deals for selling snakes had yet to provide financial benefits. In court, Lindley admitted to having extramarital relationships with several men, expressing deep regret for her actions. By the time she considered discussing divorce, she was unsure who to turn to, given her father's history with divorce and his strong views on both divorce and affairs. Seeking someone to support her in her conversation with Ben, she reached out to past boyfriends and reconnected with Michael Humphrey. During cross-examination by the prosecution, Lindley confessed to willingly participating in her husband's death and intentionally concealing Michael Humphrey's involvement. She cited marital difficulties, including disputes, alleged physical and sexual abuse by Ben, and the stress associated with his snake breeding business. Lindley feared Ben and worried about his reaction whenever she brought up the topic of divorce. On June 8, 2017, she brought Michael Humphrey to the farm that day. She claimed her presence at the farm was not meant to end her husband's life, but rather to discuss a divorce. Lindley mentioned taking out some trash from Ben before entering the nursery, where she saw Humphrey and Ben washing their hands. Lindley described being unable to hear their conversation, as she was preoccupied with how she would tell Ben she wanted a divorce. Her voice trembled while recounting seeing Humphrey draw a pistol and shoot her husband. Hence she heard more shots. Reality hit hard when Lindley returned to the snake breeding facility and found Ben's body. She called Ben's brother Sam, who arrived soon after. They checked for a pulse and whether Ben was breathing, hoping he might still be alive. Lindley expressed regret for not immediately informing police that she had been at the breeding facility earlier with Michael Humphrey. The life insurance policy that Ben had taken out years earlier could have resulted in a payout of $1 million. However, Lindley waived her rights to this money. During the court hearing, Lindley expressed regrets about her ongoing deceit. "I was just trying to escape from the truth of what happened," she stated, clarifying that she never wished for her husband's death. Following the final verdict, Lindley Rennick's defense team chose not to petition for a new trial, and no appeals were filed against her conviction. Lindley Rennick filed a defamation lawsuit against Blackwell, asserting that his statements about her involvement in her husband's death were false. However, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Linley's testimony during cross-examination. He queried why she didn't check on her husband after hearing gunshots and why she didn't call 911. Furthermore, he asked why she sent friendly messages to him and Humphrey after the shooting and continued to lie even when emergency responders got involved. During sentencing for second-degree murder and armed criminal action, Linley Rennick broke down but did not admit guilt. On December 9, 2021, she was found guilty of second-degree murder. The 33-year-old was sentenced to 13 years for murder and an additional 3 years for armed criminal action in January by Judge Kevin Crane, a total sentence of 16 years. Sam Rennick's final words conveyed deep disappointment. He was astonished that an individual's life in Missouri could be valued at just 13 years. Ben Rennick, a young man brimming with hope and a promising future, found himself in a dire situation due to the actions of one woman. Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to present to you another disturbing case, the case of Paige Bergfeld. The discovery of Paige Bergfeld's car marked the beginning of a perplexing and mysterious story that unfolded on the first Sunday of July 2007. On that day, a red Ford Focus belonging to the missing Paige was discovered. However, the location where the car was found and its condition raised significant questions and suspicions. The vehicle was situated in a remote area Paige rarely visited. Moreover, it was completely engulfed in flames, suggesting that something alarming and unusual had occurred. The county district attorney scrutinized the case closely. His preliminary findings indicated the fire surrounding the car was intentional. This conclusion was corroborated by the fact that nothing else had burned in the vicinity. The strange incident involving Paige Bergfeld's car turned out to be just the beginning of an even more intricate story. June 28, 2007 is a date forever etched in the memories of Paige's family and friends. On that ordinary day, Paige left her 3 children with a friend, Carol Linderholm, early in the morning. Everything seemed normal. No one anticipated trouble or imagined what was soon to transpire. Paige, a responsible mother, always called or came to pick up her children on time. However, when Paige did not return to pick up her children, friends and relatives tried contacting her, but received no response. 8-year-old Jazz, her eldest child, took initiative in searching for his missing mother. After sending several messages to her phone without any reply, Jazz insisted on searching with Carol. They went to the police station, where Jazz reported his mom hadn't returned for him. The community was shocked by her mysterious disappearance, and many were eager to assist in her search. Consequently, a massive public search operation commenced to bring this young woman back to her children and loved ones. That same day, Frank Bergfeld, Paige's father, received a call from an official with the sheriff's department. The message was brief and shocking. His daughter had disappeared. Frank quickly realized something serious was amiss. He attempted to contact Paige, but there was no response. Left with no other option, Frank called his eldest son, Craig, who lived on the opposite side of the country. Without a moment's hesitation, Craig purchased a one-way ticket and arrived in town ready to assist in the search for his sister. Family and friends combined efforts with police and volunteers to initiate a massive search operation. People from various neighborhoods gathered to look for Paige, meticulously combing the surrounding areas and checking every possible corner where any trace of her could be found. The police began by examining Paige's history with her loved ones to determine if they had any involvement in her disappearance. Naturally, authorities directed their attention to Paige's relationship with her first husband, Howard Bigler. Paige and Howard's relationship traced back to her high school years. After graduating from high school, Paige enrolled in the nursing program at the University of Florida, where she met a young man named Howard Bigler. Their mutual affection led them to start dating. Upon successfully obtaining her nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado, where she continued living with her family. In 1995, after some time passed, she married Howard Bigler. At first glance, they appeared as a happy couple. They shared numerous interests and views on life. Nonetheless, there was one significant rift. Paige desired to have children and start a family, while Howard did not share this aspiration. This fundamental disagreement sparked several arguments and many discussions. Attempts at compromise failed repeatedly. Thus, in 1997, they decided it best to part ways through divorce. Despite this separation, their bond remained strong enough that the former spouses continued being friends. Later on, Paige married Rob Dixon, but that marriage too ended in divorce. Following her divorce from Rob, Paige reconnected with Howard once more. Howard claimed he was among the last individuals to see Paige alive on the 28th of that month. They met up in Eagle County, Colorado. It was due to personal business. There, they spent Thursday together. The former spouses then returned to their cities. Howard confirmed that they continued to communicate by phone after the meeting. Upon learning of Paige's disappearance, Howard immediately contacted emergency services. While speaking to the operator, he expressed his concern and belief that something terrible had happened to Paige. The phone recording was corroborated by cell tower data, showing that on the day Paige disappeared, Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area, which is several hours away from where she vanished. This gave police officers reason to remove Howard from the list of suspects. Police began to examine Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and quickly uncovered many events that raised questions and warranted further investigation. It turned out that during their marriage, Paige had reported Rob to the police twice for harassment. After her divorce from her first husband, Paige took a job at a strip club in Denver, where she met Rob Dixon. The man was wealthy and had inherited a large fortune through his family's business. Having fallen in love with each other, Paige and Rob did not hesitate and entered into marriage in 1998. The family settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige fulfilled her dream of becoming a mother. A few years later, the couple had 3 children, who became the most important thing in her life. The first years of marriage seemed happy as Paige and Rob were immersed in a world of luxury, leading a well-to-do lifestyle. However, and quite suddenly, things began to fall apart due to financial difficulties Rob faced. Some of his family's businesses had serious problems, and as a result, the economic situation in the family deteriorated so much that Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy. The financial collapse led to a profound family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated so that Paige contacted emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but the time the police arrived, both claimed to have resolved their issues on their own. A year later, another incident occurred that was markedly different. Paige reported Rob for assault, claiming he hit her while she was holding their youngest child. This time, Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and Rob avoided jail time. The relationship between husband and wife continued deteriorating, leading them to separate. Rob subsequently moved to Pennsylvania. Investigators interviewed him to establish his alibi for the day Paige disappeared. Rob asserted he was at home and could not have harmed Paige. Despite the separation, Rob joined the search effort and was very active in trying to find Paige. Investigating officers left no stone unturned in their quest to uncover clues that might unravel this mysterious case and locate the missing mother. One of the initial steps involved a meticulous examination of Paige's car. Since arson is often used to destroy potential evidence, experts thoroughly inspected the vehicle and discovered valuable information. For instance, the driver's seat had been pushed back as far as it would go, suggesting that a tall man had driven it last. Given Paige's shorter stature, she couldn't have reached the pedals from that position. In addition, they found Paige's notebook in the trunk of the car, with several pages torn out, covering June 26 through June 29th. A few days after a burning car was discovered, a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town due to tire problems. A nearby checkbook caught his eye. He promptly reported it to the authorities. As they investigated that section of the road, they also found medical records, insurance cards, and other items belonging to Paige. Sergeant Weiler noticed that several pages from the checkbook had been torn out, and the items were scattered over a considerable distance. Most significantly, a business card found at the scene became key to revisiting the investigation. It was revealed that Paige led a secret life unknown to her loved ones. The business card indicated she worked under the alias Carrie. This discovery challenged all previous assumptions about Paige Bergfeld's disappearance. From that point forward, police officers faced previously unimaginable circumstances. After her divorce, Paige realized she needed to work hard and earn enough to provide for her children and meet their needs. She's starting a children's clothing business while simultaneously teaching dance lessons and selling kitchen supplies at a company. Despite her busy schedule, Paige always made time for her children, attended Parent-Teacher Association meetings, and stayed active in school groups. However, this new discovery by the police upended everything known before. It turned out she had been living a completely secret life with another phone used exclusively for professional activities related to her job as an escort. This phone became essential in unraveling the complex mystery that even Paige's close friends and family couldn't have imagined. Investigators were now faced with many questions. Why did such a devoted mother and successful businesswoman decide to live this double life? How was this secret profession connected to her disappearance? All these queries became priority in the investigation, adding layers of complexity and intrigue. Using the cell phone found in Paige's car, detectives accessed a list of contacts and calls made and received in the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call from that phone was made on June 28th around 9 p.m. After analyzing this information, 7 individuals were identified as suspects. One of them was Lester Ralph Jones. Investigators paid special attention to Jones due to his criminal history, which included violence against women and kidnapping. For one incident, he served 5 years in prison. But that alerted the police. A white car, matching the description given by Carol Paige's friend, also raised suspicions. Carol shared crucial details with detectives. She recounted a day when Paige approached her car and noticed another white car blocking her driveway. Annoyed, she got behind the wheel to maneuver out, but ended up colliding with the other vehicle. The unknown driver immediately fled the scene. With this information, investigators speculated that Lester might have been obsessed with Paige and possibly following her. Further digging revealed that Lester Jones had tried to schedule an appointment with Paige the day before she disappeared. When questioned, Lester denied knowing anything about Paige's disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, many suspicious items were found in his home: a disposable cell phone, men's wigs, a sheet with an escort services phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. Particular attention was given to the disposable cell phone found at Lester's residence. Analysis of call records from Paige's cell phone indicated that on the day she went missing, someone tried contacting her multiple times from an unregistered number. When questioned further, Lester claimed he didn't own a second cell phone, indicating he lied to police. Police determined that the phone had been purchased at a supermarket on North Avenue. Store video footage confirmed Lester was indeed the purchaser of that disposable cell phone. When he was shown the video footage, he refused to acknowledge that was him. As a result of all this, Lester Jones became the prime suspect in Paige's disappearance. With no concrete evidence pointing to his guilt, the police to follow him and attempted to find Paige's body in order to have enough evidence to press charges. The case was put on hold for several years. Meanwhile, the young woman's family and loved ones were at a loss for grief. No one knew what had happened to the young mother, and the search seemed hopeless. As time went on, the hope that Paige would be found alive was dwindling. That all changed in 2012 when a hiker accidentally stumbled upon human remains in a ravine among rocks and bushes in Delta County. The find was discovered very close to the road, where Paige's personal belongings had been found 5 years earlier. Experts who arrived on the scene were almost certain that it was the body of the young mother. The experts ran a DNA test, and the results confirmed that it was Paige. she was found, but it was a grisly end to her story. The exact cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the body. However, it was found that Paige had been struck many times as several of her bones were broken, particularly the bones in her face. As a result, it was determined that she died from injuries sustained during the beating. This information added to the horrific drama of the story. Paige's body was underground, and due to years of soil erosion, ended up on the surface. This may explain why she was not discovered earlier. Lester Ralph Jones's case came to a halt for several years after Paige's remains were discovered. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. However, the trial didn't begin until July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors argued that Lester, who already had a history of violence against women, was frustrated at not being able to see Paige after trying to get an appointment with her. The main witness for the prosecution was Lester's ex-wife Lisa. She recounted how he kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s. Lisa Lester found it difficult to come to terms with her decision to end the relationship on multiple occasions. Once, he attacked the couple, gun in hand. Tragically, Lisa's partner was shot in the head. A month later, Lester threatened her again, telling her she might end up at the bottom of a lake. Fortunately, Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police. This led to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. Lester's defense attorneys contended that the police had detained an innocent man. They suggested that other clients of Paige could have had motives for the crime. However, they did not present convincing evidence linking others to the murder. Lester's current spouse also testified before the jury. Despite knowing he used an escort service, she did not abandon him because of her faith. Nonetheless, she didn't provide him an alibi, and even identified him from a surveillance video at a supermarket where he bought a disposable phone on September 9, 2016. The jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict in the first trial, leading it to be declared a mistrial. However, the district attorney was firm in believing Lester's guilt and didn't give up. Over several days, he diligently re-examined all evidence. On November 21, 2016, after thoroughly reviewing all of it, the jury reached a verdict. Lester was found guilty of all charges related to Paige's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Although the defense appealed this sentence, an appeals court panel upheld it in June 2022 and confirmed Lester's guilt. Paige's final farewell took place on April 28, 2012. Her obituary described her as a beautiful and radiant woman whose smile could be compared to the sun. Her tragic loss deeply affected her family and friends. Her 3 children were orphaned and lost their main support and encouragement. Paige's case drew public attention and lasted many years. Nevertheless, law enforcement and relatives persevered tirelessly until justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now he won't be able to harm anyone else. Paige's story underscores why it's vital to fight for justice, regardless of how long it takes or how much effort is required. Her memory will forever linger in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, let's listen to the case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela. Her mother, Andrina Bermudos Millian, hailed from Maturin, Monagas. Her father, Leonardo Salazar, came from Tucupita, a town in the state of Delta Amacuro. A year after Paula's birth, in September 2016, the couple decided to immigrate with their child to Ecuador. They were seeking better opportunities for themselves and their daughter. Shortly after relocating to Quito, the capital of Ecuador, the family dynamic began to deteriorate due to various reasons. Andrina made the decision to separate from Leonardo and moved with Paula to Cuenca, Ecuador's 3rd largest city. In Cuenca lived the mother of Andrina's best friend. She kindly offered them lodging while they sought a new place and means of employment. Meanwhile, given the circumstances and breakup, Leonardo decided to return to Venezuela. He eventually emigrated again, this time to Trinidad and Tobago. Leonardo had long been disabled, An accident during his youth had left his left arm entirely incapacitated. This disability made securing stable employment challenging even in Quito. Following her move to Cuenca, Andreina almost cut off communication with Leonardo completely. She informed him just once that she had secured work on a farm in Tabacundo. A few months after parting ways with Leonardo, Andreina entered into a new relationship with Washington Andreas Aymaro, a local Ecuadorian and owner of the farm where she worked. Washington came from a wealthy family. When Paula reached about 18 months old, Andreina moved in with Washington, along with Paula. On April 7, 2019, Andreina and Washington welcomed a child together. This marked a period of happiness and unity for the family. However, everything changed dramatically on March 27, 2020. An event occurred that profoundly impacted all involved parties' lives. During that period, the family was living well, enjoying each day on the farm, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. One day Andreas decided to take to the flower plantations by car. However, en route, the girl became very ill. She felt dizzy and began to vomit. Left with no choice, Andreas stopped at a public restroom. As soon as they entered the restroom, Paula vomited again. Andreas decided to leave her alone for a few minutes while he went back to the car to retrieve a change of clothes since hers were dirty. Upon his return, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He immediately pulled her out and attempted first aid before rushing her to the hospital. When the 4-year-old was handed over to medical professionals, she showed no signs of life. Doctors declared Paula deceased after performing an initial examination. They quickly noticed inconsistencies in Andreas's story. For instance, they observed bruises on her body and face that did not match his account. Medical protocols require doctors to notify police in such situations, which they did right away. Police arrived shortly thereafter and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's death. Although he claimed she had drowned in the toilet bowl, the autopsy revealed a more troubling reality. Tests showed that Paula had been dead for approximately 24 hours when she arrived at the hospital. This contradicted Andreas's timeline of events. He stated that he had given her first aid and cardiopulmonary resuscitation just 20 minutes before taking her there. Moreover, the autopsy uncovered severe injuries, several broken ribs, multiple microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, all contributing factors to her death. It became clear that Paula's death was not an accident. Her small body bore numerous recent and old injuries. Leonardo Salazar, Paula's father, learned of her death on March 33, days after the events transpired. His mother, who remained in Venezuela, informed him via phone. She had learned about it through a friend of Andreina's. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andreina began a new relationship and ceased all communication with him. Consequently, for 3 days, Leonardo was unaware of the tragedy. During that time, he could only see Paula through pictures sent by Andreina and their mutual friends. Additionally, Andreina blocked Leonardo on all social media platforms, preventing any form of communication with Paula. She also cut off contact with almost all of Leonardo's relatives. It is worth noting that she turned most of their mutual friends against Leonardo by portraying him as disinterested in maintaining a relationship with Paula. Despite these challenges, Leonardo was determined to learn about his daughter's death. However, Andreina's family provided an alternative explanation for her passing. At that time, Ecuador, like much of the world, was under quarantine due to the pandemic. Understandably skeptical about this claim, Leonardo began researching virus-related deaths in the country through social media and news sites. He quickly found no children among the few victims. With the assistance of his relatives, Leonardo continued his investigation. One relative sent him a newspaper article reporting the arrest of Andreina on suspicion of killing Paula. Persistently seeking answers, he called Andreina daily until she finally returned his call 10 days later. Because her lawyers had forbidden her to, the next step Leonardo took was to create a Facebook page with an acquaintance of his. This page was dedicated to Paula. They also set up an Instagram profile called Justice for Bola. The posts they published caused a huge backlash across social media. the main goal to bring those responsible for his daughter's death to justice. On the same day that Andreina called Leonardo, she arrived at the morgue to begin arranging her daughter's funeral. Even though the prosecutor working on the case asked for more time to investigate the body, Paula's funeral still took place on April 10, 2020. Andreina did not allow a second autopsy to be performed on Paula. Thanks to information posted on social media and shared by Andreina's friends, people in her circle contacted Leonardo and told him about Paula's sad life before her death. They sent Leonardo various pieces of information they had collected, most of which were isolated recordings of conversations, photos, audio clips, and similar items. According to witnesses, ever since Paula's mother moved in with Andreas, Paula had endured abuse from both her stepfather and her own mother. Not only did Andrea allow her daughter to be treated this way, but she herself was directly involved in it. Everyone noted that Paula seemed happy and cheerful only when she was playing alone. In the presence of her stepfather, she appeared depressed, acted shy, and became suddenly very fearful. At one point, the little girl told people she trusted that her mother and stepfather would beat her if she misbehaved. One day she even confessed that as punishment, Andreas pushed her into a wall where she hit her head. Paula referred to her stepfather as nothing less than a monster, and was undoubtedly very afraid of him. She constantly had nightmares and suffered from insomnia at a young age. The couple initially preferred that the girl, who was 2 years old at the time they moved into the stepfather's home, sleep alone when falling asleep. Paula often cried, but no one paid any attention to her. Additionally, her mother and stepfather forced her to manage on her own without assistance. Moreover, her mother Andreina had been teaching her how to cook since she was 2 years old, which seemed unreasonable. Paula was compelled to prepare her own breakfast and dinners because her mother preferred to sleep in the mornings and take a break from caregiving in the evenings. She simply did not want to care for her daughter. Andreina did not mind that Paula had to handle the oven by herself, despite the inherent dangers. At preschool, where Andreina had enrolled Paula, the girl frequently complained of pain in her legs and back, and often mentioned she could not walk. Her constant complaints, along with the bruises on her body, prompted the teacher to show her to doctors at a health center. After an examination, they concluded that Paula was being mistreated at home. The teachers then called a special police organization to investigate the abuse within Paula's family. Officials took up the case and decided to send Paula somewhere safe while they conducted their investigation. Consequently, on October 16, 2019, Paula was temporarily transferred to her uncle's care, Andreina's brother. A hearing on the matter was set for December 4, 2019. Unfortunately, the teachers who were supposed to testify never appeared for reasons unknown. As a result, they scheduled a retrial for February 27, 2020. However, once again, all the teachers failed to attend. Consequently, the court had no option but to dismiss all charges against Paula's parents and return her to her mother. 1 month later, on March 27th, Paula passed away. The exact reasons why the teachers chose not to attend either hearing remain unknown. It is speculated that Andreina might have bribed or persuaded them that although Paula had some issues, it wasn't due to any wrongdoing by her parents. After Paula's tragic death, Andreas was placed in protective custody during the investigation. Soon appealed this decision, resulting in a hearing on June 12, 2020. At the hearing, which was held via video conference, the judge set an order and determined Andreas could be released to house arrest. However, during the hearing, Andreas announced that he was withdrawing his appeal. At that time, Leonardo was still conducting a social media campaign and asked his subscribers for financial support to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador. His goal was to file a complaint against Andreina, Paula's mother, before it became too late. Andreina had not yet been charged and remained free. Fortunately, Leonardo managed to secure sufficient financial aid as well as free legal advice from 2 Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro. They generously offered him support and assistance with the lawsuit. Leonardo faced significant challenges to reach Ecuador. He had to cross the border between Trinidad and Venezuela by rafting across dangerous waters, and then travel across rugged terrain. Due to the pandemic, all regular maritime and land borders of Venezuela were closed. Thus, only a few flights were available to a handful of countries. Once Leonardo arrived in Táchira state, he crossed into Colombia over hazardous terrain. From there, he took a bus to Ipiales and continued onward through hills and plains until reaching Rumichaca Bridge, the border between Colombia and Ecuador. Upon crossing into Ecuador, Leonardo took a cab to Quito. On June 30th, he immediately met with a lawyer upon arrival. The bereaved father filed a complaint against his ex-girlfriend, so she would also be considered a suspect in Paula's murder. By July 6, 2020, an indictment was issued against Andreina. She appeared in court, where it was decided that house arrest would suffice instead of full custody. In November 2020, the initial hearing for the case took place. Although a specific trial date had not yet been determined at that time, participation and discussions were intense. Leonardo's attorney voiced concerns about Andreina's potential escape risk, as she had previously attempted suicide using pills. The lawyer requested that Andreina be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet. The judge this request, and also reduced her required court appearances to once a week instead of twice. However, shortly after, Andreina requested a reconsideration regarding the necessity of wearing the electronic bracelet. Consequently, another hearing was held on November 16th to review this decision. These developments inevitably caused delays in the trial proceedings, but eventually the judge set a new date for December. Despite limited media coverage of Andreas and Andreina's trial, much information found its way onto social media platforms. However, due to the pandemic dominating news coverage at the time, some details remained unreported. The trial began on January 14, 2021. At that point, no final decision had been made regarding Andreina's alternative imprisonment options, while Andreas remained detained at the regional detention center. The trial was conducted behind closed doors, with no media representatives present. Some participants attended via video link to ensure proceedings continued smoothly despite restrictions. According to testimony from the doctor who performed Paula's autopsy, several disturbing findings were made. Nearly all of her spinal discs had been rebuilt. She suffered broken ribs, some of which had fused naturally over time, and she displayed symptoms like nail stigmata, where nails grow into the skin, as well as bruises and scratches on her face and body. Furthermore, there was fluid accumulation in her lungs and serious injuries, such as scars on her head and lacerations on her colon. These medical findings suggested prolonged physical trauma before Paula's death and became critical evidence in understanding what transpired during her final days. The later injuries were what caused the infection to develop into sepsis, ultimately leading to death. The autopsy report confirmed that by the time took Paula to the hospital, she had been deceased for approximately 24 hours. The extent of her internal and external injuries revealed the severity of cruelty she had endured, as well as the negligence of her guardians, who never once sought medical attention for her. Additionally, Paula was malnourished, underweight, and too small for her age, with clear mineral and nutritional deficiencies. Regarding Paula's injuries, her mother Andreina tried to persuade family and friends that Paula had numerous psychological problems. She asserted that these issues led to self-harm behaviors, which were attempts by Paula to attract attention. According to Andreina, when Paula's younger brother was born, Paula began lacking parental attention, stopped sleeping at night, and attempted to manipulate everyone through crying. In October 2019, even though Paula was supposed to stay with her uncle per a board's decision, she actually continued staying at her parents' house most of the time and only slept at her uncle's house occasionally. This indicates that measures taken by authorities did not achieve their intended outcomes. Furthermore, it was established that in 2017, shortly after Leonardo's departure from Ecuador, Paula began experiencing abuse, likely starting right after Andreina entered into a relationship with Andreas. At the trial attended by over 40 witnesses from the accusing party, it was confirmed that Paula endured abuse for at least 3 years of her short life. At the final hearing before the judge delivered the verdict, Andreina claimed full responsibility for the child's abuse. She admitted to beating Paula with a belt and sometimes using her fists. Through this statement, Andreina attempted to deflect blame away from her partner Andreas. She stated emphatically that he was innocent, that he had no involvement in the matter, and that he had never mistreated Paula. Andreina also mentioned that she had reprimanded her daughter for causing issues with her new husband. Breaking up with him meant returning to the streets and losing the financial stability she could only gain through his support. Taking care of her daughter was not her main concern. Upon reviewing Paula's circumstances, the judges expressed concern for the couple's newborn son. However, they noted that this child, unlike Paula, was never abused. It is worth mentioning that Andreas opted to exercise his right to remain silent and has not commented on the incident since his arrest on February 3, 2021. Paula's trial concluded with both defendants being found guilty of murdering the girl. The maximum penalty for this crime is 13 years. Leonardo's original attorneys and the prosecution sought the maximum punishment for the perpetrators. However, considering an aggravating factor that Paula was just 4 years old and unable to defend herself, the chief judge sentenced Andreina and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. According to Ecuadorian law, convicted individuals have 3 days to appeal a verdict. The couple, as anticipated, indicated their intention to do so immediately. Despite being sentenced to 17 years and 4 months in prison, Andre remained under house arrest instead of being jailed directly. She utilized her opportunity to appeal, necessitating higher court confirmation of her incarceration sentence. Meanwhile, she continues to follow the previously imposed measures. This situation is markedly different from Andreas' case. He was detained upon his appearance at the hospital with a deceased girl. Public outrage has been palpable over Andreina remaining at large. Of particular note is Leonardo's anger and concern over her potentially evading justice. Max received an urgent call from his close friend, Jonathan Hoffman, on May 18, 2012, at 5 p.m. Both were seniors at Farmington Central High School in the affluent West Bloomfield area near Detroit, Michigan. Their friendship began in 9th grade during an English class and was sparked by a mutual appreciation for Tupac, one of the most influential figures in American hip-hop. Jonathan confided in Max that he had recently failed a court-mandated drug screening. He had been on probation since authorities found a prohibited synthetic substance in his vehicle 2 months earlier. Jonathan expressed concern over his grandmother Sandra's intense anger towards him. At 17 years old, Jonathan had been living in his grandparents' apartment for 9 months following his parents' divorce and their relocation to Arizona. Initially, Jonathan went with his parents to Arizona. However, shortly after their arrival, the family was dealt a severe blow when his younger sister Jessica was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor. This necessitated multiple surgeries and ongoing medical care. Adapting to a new school while coping with his sister's health issues left Jonathan feeling unhappy and despondent. Jonathan was overjoyed when his grandmother Sandra suggested he return to West Bloomfield and stay with her until he completed high school. The prospect of reuniting with friends and familiar surroundings excited him. Nevertheless, not everyone approved of the arrangement between Jonathan and his grandmother. Jonathan's father Michael, a prominent attorney for many years, had observed some disconcerting traits in Sandra's personality. 74-year-old Sandra Lane, a retired educator and mother of 5, could be exacting and stern. While she cherished her grandson deeply, along with her 85-year-old husband Fred, the situation presented its challenges given the teenager's yearning to reconnect with friends during what should have been a stable final year at Farmington Central High School. Jonathan's father eventually conceded, allowing him to thrive once again at Farmington High School. There, he was recognized as the class clown, an exceptionally intelligent student, and a tech whiz. He had secured a full scholarship to Eastern Michigan University. His peers saw him as a spirited, cheerful, and optimistic individual. That's why Jonathan's call to Max caused such alarm. He didn't sound like himself. His voice carried not only concern, but also palpable fear. The friends decided to meet up later that same day, and Jonathan promised he'd text within the next 30 minutes to confirm the time. Max waited for the message, but 40 minutes passed with no word from his friend. Growing impatient, Max decided to call Jonathan directly. The phone rang, and rang without any response. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Jonathan would never be able to reply again. Just before this incident, around 5:20 p.m., the West Bloomfield Township Police Department received an emergency call from Sandra Lane's residence, Jonathan's grandmother's home. The young caller informed the dispatcher he had been shot and struggled for breath over those 3 minutes. He begged for help, stating that he was on the brink of death. The assailant had already fled the scene without seeking aid. The subsequent events were even more horrific. The emergency dispatcher listened as Jonathan frantically called out for help before several gunshots rang out again. His screams of pain were followed by faint words that he was dying. Then came a short silence before a woman's scream echoed through the line, leading to an eerie quietude. By about 5:30 p.m., West Bloomfield police arrived at Sandra Lane's condo in the serene Maple Point gated community, a neighborhood known for its low crime rate and predominantly inhabited by retirees. A resident had reported hearing gunshots in this typically peaceful area. As officers disembarked from their vehicle onto the neatly kept lawn, they headed into what would become one of their most chilling calls yet. Another gunshot reverberated from within the residence. Before the officers could make their way inside, a woman appeared at the front door, the officer's instructions to disarm herself. She was a small elderly woman with fading red hair, her clothes spattered with blood. With her hands raised in surrender, she informed the officers that she had just taken her grandson's life. This revelation stunned the officers, yet it paled in comparison to what awaited them inside. As they entered the condo, the officers were confronted with a ghastly scene. Blood and smudges were present in nearly every room. Bullet impacts marred both walls and furnishings, and empty shell casings littered the ground. Near the entryway lay a discarded 9mm Glock 17 semi-automatic handgun. Subsequent forensic analysis would uncover additional magazines for the firearm hidden within the residence. On the upper floor, police found 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman sprawled face down in a pool of blood. He suffered from multiple gunshot wounds across his chest, arms, back, and stomach, indicating that many shots were fired at close quarters. Emergency medical personnel swiftly transported him to Botsford Hospital, clinging to hope they could save him. Sadly, by 6 p.m., Jonathan succumbed to his injuries. Sandra was taken to the closest medical facility as a precautionary measure. Medical professionals conducted various examinations to confirm her well-being. The next day, Sandra Lane faced charges for her grandson's homicide and was detained without bail while awaiting trial for either first or second-degree murder, her guilt left to be determined by a jury. Throughout this ordeal, she maintained her innocence. News of this incident plunged Jonathan's family, friends, and neighbors into deep sorrow and shock. They all pondered what could have driven Sandra to turn a firearm on her dearly loved grandson. The news of this tragic event spread rapidly through the tranquil neighborhood, with media outlets speculating on various theories. Whispers suggested that Jonathan had failed a drug screening test. Journalists highlighted a narrative involving two neglectful parents who left their substance-dependent teenage son in the care of elderly grandparents. Based on the grandmother's testimony, it was revealed that at the time Jonathan's passing, he had an illegal synthetic drug in his system, which had previously caused him complications. His death shortly after another sensational incident involving hallucinogen consumption. Just 2 weeks prior, another youth under the influence of drugs assaulted his family with a baseball bat, resulting in a fatal event. Takia Cipriana and his accomplice consumed a prohibited substance before attacking their parents. Sandra Lane's attorney argued that she had legitimate concerns for her safety due to managing a young man on probation who was difficult to restrain. It was widely reported that this particular drug could induce aggression in users. If an incident similar to Takia's had occurred at Sandra's residence, could her actions against Jonathan be justified as self-defense? This was the reasoning Sandra provided to both the police and jury. She asserted that since Jonathan's return to West Bloomfield, he had become unruly and exhibited aggressive behavior. Sandra claimed that he rarely left the house and mingled with teenagers addicted to dangerous synthetic drugs. Sandra also stated that Jonathan's parents did not inform her about his addiction before his arrival and showed little concern for his activities during his stay. Michael, Jonathan's father, was portrayed as having abandoned him. Jonathan frequently had fits of rage, destroying objects and damaging furniture in his room. When upset or during disputes, he would lash out, even breaking his own possessions like his computer monitor and phone. Authorities confirmed that Jonathan had a history with illegal substances. On March 17, 2011, he was apprehended and penalized for possessing hallucinogenic drugs. Subsequently, in court, he received a 93-day deferred sentence, along with a year of probation and the requirement for random drug screenings related to these substances. Jonathan's acquaintances shared with law enforcement their concerns regarding his drug habit and their efforts to redirect him away from it. Sandra exerted considerable effort to assist Jonathan in reforming his ways, focusing on his academic performance and adhering to her guidelines. Nevertheless, he resisted these attempts, displaying defiance, erratic behavior, and occasional aggression. Fred confirmed that from the moment Jonathan arrived, there were continuous and intense disputes between him and Sandra. She even contacted the police multiple times due to Jonathan becoming utterly unmanageable. She sought assistance from the school as well, but all efforts proved futile. Sandra recounted an incident where Jonathan, under the influence of drugs, lost complete control. This situation necessitated hospital staff to restrain him to a gurney. The elderly woman implored his parents for help. However, his father remained indifferent and did not return to Michigan. Gradually, Sandra began fearing for her safety. She confided in her husband about her concerns regarding their grandson and his disreputable associates. In a bid for self-protection and to safeguard her elderly husband, feeling cornered with no other option, Sandra acquired a Glock 17 pistol for defense in case Jonathan or his friends became aggressive. On the critical morning of May 18, 2012, Lane took Jonathan for a drug test that returned positive for illicit substances. Jonathan was instructed to undergo another test later that day. Upon receiving another positive result, he became furious while in his grandmother's vehicle. He resorted to swearing violently, kicking the dashboard and at one point, seizing the steering wheel, compelling Sandra to halt the car multiple times. Jonathan even attempted to snatch the car keys at one juncture. Upon their return home, the confrontation intensified. Apprehensive that he might be incarcerated, Jonathan decided to flee immediately to Arizona. He demanded $2,000 and the car keys from his grandmother. She complied with neither request. When Grandpa Fred took the dog for a walk, Sandra felt overwhelmingly frightened and attempted to pacify the teenager, to no avail. She retreated to her bedroom and retrieved the loaded pistol, hoping it would compel her grandson to heed her words, or at least acknowledge her presence. Upon returning upstairs to Jonathan's bedroom and finding him in the bathroom, instead of heeding her, the boy hurled insults, kicked her in the abdomen, and struck her on the head. A struggle ensued during which Sandra discharged the firearm. She then fled to the basement in a state of panic, seeking refuge. After a while, she ventured upstairs to check on him, only for her grandson to assault her once more, attempting to wrest the gun away. In the ensuing she shot again in self-defense. This narrative paints a picture of elderly individuals trapped in a dire predicament that tragically culminated in Sandra shooting her beloved grandson out of genuine fear for her own life. However, questions remain as to whether Lane's account is entirely accurate. As the investigation deepened, a contrasting narrative began to surface, one that was still tragic but considerably more concerning. Initial claims by Sandra regarding Jonathan's alleged violent nature didn't align with the experiences of those who knew him personally. Contrary to portraying him as aggressive, interviews revealed that at school, Jonathan was known as humorous and peace-loving. He was always quick to diffuse conflicts with his humor and intelligence. Friends also testified that they hadn't observed any recent changes in his demeanor. Furthermore, Jonathan was described as having a very lean build, standing at just 1.67 meters tall and weighing merely 50 kilograms, hardly fitting the profile of a physically intimidating person. His stature was notably similar to his grandmother's. It appeared that instances of Jonathan's so-called rage were exclusively reported by Sandra, a claim now met with skepticism. Fred, Sandra's husband, acknowledged witnessing heated arguments between his wife and grandson. Despite being present at home almost all the time, there was never any physical violence. Sandra played a key role in overseeing Jonathan's education, establishing strict expectations, which the teenager had difficulty meeting. Fred even suggested sending Jonathan back to his parents in Arizona. However, Sandra rejected this proposal, contradicting her claim that the boy was unmanageable under her care. Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, told the police that during the 9 months Jonathan stayed with his grandparents, he maintained daily communication with her and visited them monthly. Throughout this period, Sandra never reported any issues between her and Jonathan, nor did she express feeling overwhelmed by his presence. When Jennifer learned about Jonathan's legal troubles involving illicit substances, she discussed possible solutions with her mother. She considered either rehabilitation or sending him back to Arizona. Sandra convinced her that she could handle the situation independently. Reluctantly, Jennifer agreed to leave her son in her parents' custody, a decision that would later prove tragically significant. Authorities were summoned to the Lane household on 2 occasions. The first call came in March 2012 when Jonathan himself dialed emergency services. He was distressed after consuming magic mushrooms and experiencing severe paranoia, fearing for his life. Upon arrival, police noted that he showed no aggression but was terrified upon seeing them. He eagerly embraced one officer before being secured to a stretcher for his protection and transported to a medical facility. Just 4 days after this incident with magic mushrooms, Sandra Lane reached out to 911 again. She reported that her grandson was enraged and attempting to flee, while Jonathan informed the dispatcher that his grandmother was forcibly trying to confine him in her vehicle. When officers arrived, they encountered Jonathan vocally berating his grandmother. The law enforcement officials then proposed intervening with the irate youth. Sandra opted to handle the matter herself. This episode was recorded in the police files as a routine verbal dispute between a guardian and a child, which was settled amicably. However, for the detectives leading the investigation, this case increasingly seemed less about a rebellious teenager spiraling out of control and more about a woman enforcing her authority over a defiant child. The hearing on April 12th, regarding the possession of prohibited substances and subsequent probation, had evidently enraged Sandra. She believed she could discipline her grandson effectively. Up until that point, Sandra had been resolute in steering Jonathan onto the correct path. Yet, as graduation neared and her opportunities dwindled, this mission began to look like a failure. In that moment, Sandra faced many choices. She could have contacted her daughter or sent Jonathan for rehabilitation. Instead, she acquired a semi-automatic pistol and took several shooting lessons at a firing range. Determined to prevail in this conflict and assert control over her unruly teenage grandson at any cost, 4 days after Jonathan was placed on probation, Sandra Lane applied for a license to carry a firearm. On April 18th, she purchased a 9mm Glock, explaining to the store owner that she needed it for home protection. She chose a weapon intended for lethal force, along with ammunition containing expanding bullets designed to inflict maximum damage. After buying the pistol, Sandra trained at the nearest shooting range until she felt proficient in handling it. She kept her newfound expertise hidden from her husband, who remained unaware of the gun's presence in their home. He was quite taken aback when he discovered how much his wife had managed to achieve covertly. On the fateful day of May 18, 2012, Sandra and Jonathan returned home at around 5 p.m. Sandra then requested her husband, Fred, to take their dog for a walk, and insisted that he remain outside until she gave him permission to return. Their outdoor time extended for so long that both homeowner and dog grew weary. They ended up sitting together on the grass watching a basketball game. As Fred Wayne, the grandfather of the deceased high schooler, recounted during an interview, when they heard police sirens, he failed to grasp the situation. Why did Sandra want Fred to leave them? It seemed less like the action of a woman fearing for her life, and more like someone with a plan, intent on carrying it out without interference or witnesses. If Jonathan was as agitated as described by his grandmother, it's unlikely Fred would have left them alone. However, more compelling evidence against Sandra was yet to come. At that same time, 5 p.m., Jonathan was talking with his friend Max about their evening plans. Max informed the police that Jonathan's tone wasn't angry or excited. Instead, he sounded frightened. He was worried about failing a drug test and anxious about his grandmother's reaction. Jonathan mentioned that Sandra was so furious she threatened to send him back to Arizona. Sandra claimed her grandson violently assaulted her, striking her in the head and abdomen before she discharged the firearm. Medical personnel from the nearest hospital examined her immediately after the incident, but found no injuries or bruises. Ballistic evidence revealed Sandra fired the weapon more than 10 times throughout various locations in the house. 6 bullets struck Jonathan. 2 shots were aimed at his back, indicating he attempted to flee from Sandra. Another shot struck him in the abdomen while he was wounded and conversing with a 911 dispatcher. The police were convinced it was Sandra chasing Jonathan, not the other way around. The grandmother sought to punish her grandson for his perceived wrongdoing while he sought refuge. At some point, she descended to the basement to reload her pistol, likely when Jonathan ascended to his bedroom to call 911, and subsequently returned, shooting him at close range while he lay on the floor bleeding. The final conclusive blow against Sandra's claims of self-defense came from the toxicology report. According to the report, at the time of the shooting, Jonathan's bloodstream didn't contain any prohibited substances. Only a metabolite of a harmful drug was identified in his urine. The forensic examiner clarified that the residual traces discovered in the urine indicated that all substances had left his body and had no impact on Hoffman's behavior. In other words, Jonathan was entirely lucid when Sandra opened fire on him. Consequently, the jury dismissed the defendant's self-defense claim. On March 19, 2013, Sandra Lane was convicted of a serious crime against her grandson, Jonathan Hoffman. Prior to sentencing, the elderly woman expressed regret for her actions, pleading for understanding. She claimed that her intention had not been to take the teenager's life, but rather to help him resolve his issues together. Meanwhile, her daughter Jennifer urged for the harshest punishment for her mother. She asserted that Sandra Lane was utterly malevolent and would undoubtedly repeat her actions if given the opportunity. Jennifer depicted her mother as a monstrous and obsessed individual fixated on academic achievement. She firmly believed that everything Lane had stated in her statement was falsehoods. She concluded by stating that her son now resided in heaven, a place where Sandra would never have access. Lane received a minimum sentence of 20 years in addition to a mandatory 2-year term for utilizing a weapon in the commission of manslaughter. Her lawyer had pleaded on her behalf, citing concerns about her potential survival during an extended prison confinement. Jonathan's funeral occurred on May 22, 2012, with approximately 700 people who had known and cherished the young man in attendance. They fondly recalled moments spent with him and cherished him as a cheerful individual who never failed to bring laughter to those around him. As a grandson, Jonathan fell short of his grandmother's expectations, ultimately leading her to conclude that he did not belong in this world. In December 2018, a group of university peers brought 20-year-old Sander Dia to the emergency room. He was unconscious, notably pale, and his skin was cold and unresponsive to any stimuli, which left the doctors completely perplexed. Here lay a fit, active young adult without any history of illness, yet his body temperature was merely 27 degrees Celsius, indicating a comatose state. Medical examinations revealed that he had hyponatremia, an alarmingly high level of sodium in his system. Typically, an adult ingests about 5 grams of salt daily, equating to about 2 grams of sodium. However, Sander had 160 grams of sodium in his body, surpassing the 2-month average intake for one person. The medical team questioned these so-called university friends about what had happened with Sander. They asked about his activities the previous night. The friends simply shrugged their shoulders, averted their eyes, and acted as if they knew nothing about Sander's condition. Clearly, something was amiss here. Despite the relentless efforts of the medical professionals to save him, 20-year-old Sander succumbed to multi-organ failure, a condition where critical body systems cease functioning. The autopsy revealed startling findings. The pathologist examined the contents of Sander's stomach to understand why a seemingly healthy university student suddenly died. To their astonishment and dismay, they discovered there was no food or water in his stomach over the past 2 days. Instead, peculiar items such as aquarium goldfish and heads of mice and eels were found inside him. This indicated that he had endured horrific experiences before his untimely death. The case of Sander garnered immense attention from online communities and media alike, rapidly becoming a topic of international discussion. Conversations erupted around universities potentially concealing the shocking misdeeds of their students and the impunity enjoyed by offspring from affluent families. This situation shone a spotlight on a student fraternity known as Rus. Established over 7 decades ago, with its symbol being a Flemish lion, this secret fraternity consists solely of male students majoring in law, engineering and business. With around 30 active members, mostly hailing from prominent backgrounds. The family's Rus is considered one of the most prestigious groups at the esteemed Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium. Almost every student aspired to join this exclusive brotherhood. Each year, they accepted only 2 or 3 new members, adding to its exclusivity. Rumors abounded about the fraternity, enhancing its allure and making it even more enigmatic and elusive. It symbolized a kind of student aristocracy with significant influence within the educational institution. In the meantime, the student fraternity Rios resumed its activities. They prepared a unique selection of items for their annual initiation tradition for new members. This initiation menu included unusual starters such as grasshoppers and cockroaches, followed by a main course featuring live mice and fish. The dessert was a combination of coffee paired with an illicit substance. A disconcerting image showcasing the fraternity's initiation ceremony circulated widely. In the photo, principal members of the group were dressed in warm outerwear like coats and cloaks, while 4 initiates faced challenges on their knees. In one startling display, an initiate had a pistol pointed at his head. Another faced the barrel of a rifle. This photograph raised numerous questions. What other types of ceremonies did this clandestine group conduct? What exactly happened within the fraternity's walls? Considering many members' backgrounds, sons of politicians, lawyers, distinguished doctors, and business leaders, one wondered, to what lengths would they go to protect their offspring if a truly grave incident occurred? Sadia wasn't actually aspiring to join the Rios Brotherhood. Born in Belgium, he was acutely aware of his fortunate circumstances. His father had come from Senegal, seeking asylum in another nation before Sadia's birth. Like many immigrant fathers, he sacrificed greatly to ensure his 2 sons could lead respectable lives. He understood that due to their skin color, his children would have to work doubly hard to earn the same respect and career opportunities as native Belgians. Mr. Dias's father worked long hours at a factory, spent nights mastering the local language, and either found or sacrificed sleep to assist his sons with their schoolwork. His only dream was for his sons to succeed in life. From an early age, Sander conscious of his future. He realized that success wouldn't come easily, it required persistent hard work. Since kindergarten, Sander had a close friend named Ferry, who lived just a 5-minute walk away. They were inseparable. They shared interests such as biking and manga, and they dreamed of attending university, securing good jobs, saving money, and eventually relocating to Japan. They even made a pinky promise to remain lifelong best friends, and one day travel to the land of the rising sun together. However, Sander was never fated to see the birthplace of manga and anime. Beyond Ferry, Sander had numerous friends. As a teenager, he excelled effortlessly in everything he tried. Whether it was solving complex mathematical problems or playing football for the first time, he amazed his friends with his natural talent. Though people often envy such gifted individuals, Sander was beloved for his charisma and approachability. His knack for conversation and ability to connect with everyone made it easy for him to make friends. After completing high school, Sander enrolled at the University of Leuven, becoming the first in his family to attend such a distinguished higher education institution. This achievement filled his father with immense pride, surpassing any dream he had ever envisioned. Although the university was just a 30-minute drive from home, Sander opted to stay in a dormitory. He chose civil engineering as his major and dedicated himself from the start to earning a master's degree in the field. Sander appeared wise beyond his years and was driven by a desire to make his father proud. His ambition was to graduate, secure a well-paying job, and enable his father to retire, repaying the sacrifices made for his children's future. By 2018, Dias was in his 3rd year of the 5-year program. He was already focused on securing employment post-graduation, so he steered clear of the party scene. His concentration was firmly on finding a lucrative job to support his family and pay bills. Aware of the potential challenges his skin color might present in landing a desirable position in a predominantly European, tightly knit industry, Sander was under no illusion about the difficulty of his task. Armed with high academic achievements, interpersonal skills, and unwavering diligence, he recognized the importance of establishing vital connections. This realization led him to consider joining the Roy Brotherhood, a group synonymous with prestige, social networking, exclusivity, and crucially, the connections needed for his career. In a world where not just merit, but also influential connections are highly valued, this seemed like a strategic move. Many members of the Roy Brotherhood hailed from well-known families. Sander's decision to apply surprised his friends, except for his older brother, who saw the potential career benefits of such societies. His childhood friend Ferry believed in Sander's natural sociability and friendliness, but was initially doubtful about these fraternities. Ferry even tried to discourage Sander from what he saw as a hazardous step. If only Ferry had known the tragic outcome that would befall Sander, he would never have ceased his efforts to dissuade him. For Sander, the decision to join Roy wasn't made lightly. He carefully considered both advantages and disadvantages before deciding to proceed. With only 2 years remaining in his program in 2018, Sander was among the 10 students who successfully navigated the stringent selection process of Roy. Among these 10, only 3, including Sander, advanced to the final initiation stage. The initial phase involved the fraternity's permanent members filtering out candidates who didn't align with their interests, character, or communication styles. Now narrowed down to 3, the real ordeal commenced. A grueling 2 months of evaluation by the elite student group, culminating in an extensive initiation ceremony spanning 2 to 3 days during this period. The new recruits were subjected to relentless and sophisticated ridicule without any breaks, completely at the mercy of the fraternity's members. Sander was aware of the harsh trials that lay ahead. He had heard tales of the brutal initiation rites. Nonetheless, he was willing to endure all the discomfort and repulsive challenges for a promising future. Just like the other 2 candidates, Dia understood the process would be tough, involving mockery and pushing them to their limits. However, no one anticipates risking their life in such situations. Sander had discussed this with a campus friend, a member of a different fraternity, who was unaware of Rouse's specific initiation practices. This friend portrayed the initiation as merely a test of physical stamina, commitment to future fraternity brothers, and discipline. Although unpleasant, he believed it was a necessary and ultimately worthwhile experience. Sander found the mandatory gatherings intolerable, especially as he was compelled to consume excessive amounts of alcohol. More distressingly, as part of the initiation, he was required to drink the urine of fraternity members. He, along with the other novices, faced relentless verbal and psychological torment. However, Dia endured the most severe hardships. He was derided for his skin tone. In October 2018, a few months before the concluding ritual, the Brotherhood organized a significant event at the Student Union building. The aspirants were made to kneel, while established members took turns forcing them to gulp down potent spirits or several liters of beer continuously. Naturally, after ingesting such volumes of alcohol, the novices could barely stand, yet were still tasked with cleaning the venue in their disoriented state. They staggered around, mopping up their own and others' regurgitation. That evening, all 3 novices were obliged to clean, but the brothers devised a different plan. They determined that Sander alone should tidy up after the celebration, because historically, those with dark skin served whites. This was a particularly harsh declaration. Dia felt utterly powerless at that moment. He was resolute in attaining his objective. He knew this situation would eventually reach a conclusion. A representative from the Student Association tried to reprimand the young men for their remarks. But what could he possibly do against 20 wealthy, noble, influential, and pampered youths? They were unafraid of anyone and conducted these acts openly without any sense of embarrassment. The fraternity members saw themselves as superior to all and simply warned the staff member not to meddle in their affairs. Sander endeavored earnestly to gain acceptance, considering his future prospects. But at just 20 years old, he was still somewhat naive. Despite this dreadful event, Dia persisted in attending fraternity gatherings. Some might question why Dia continued to seek camaraderie with these individuals. His reasons were multifaceted. Firstly, he played soccer with some of them and interacted amicably. Secondly, Sander was acutely aware of the extensive sacrifices his father had made for his education and vowed to meet those expectations. He harbored hopes that the indignities would cease once he cleared the final hurdle. In Rose's 70-plus years of history, only 2 members had been of African heritage, and presently only 1 was surviving. A dark-skinned student had been inducted in 2015, and Sander was poised to be the second to undergo the ultimate initiation rite. The final initiation, also termed baptism, was about to commence. Everything the novices had endured thus far seemed insignificant compared to the ordeal they were set to face. On December 4, 2018, at 4 p.m., the initiation commenced. Sander, along with 2 other candidates, donned lengthy flowing white robes and ventured into the city carrying bouquets of flowers. Their objective? To sell as many flowers as possible. The one who sold the fewest would endure various penalties, such as drinking sour milk, birdseed, and inevitably forced alcohol consumption. Sander finished last, selling 30 roses fewer than his peers, which led to his punishment, consuming such an excessive amount of alcohol that his speech became severely impaired in the second phase of the initiation. The novices were positioned on their knees and asked straightforward questions by 7 p.m. The fraternity members remained indifferent to Dia's struggle in articulating responses. Predictably, he was outperformed by the others and subjected to further punishment. At the end of this stage, 1.5 bottles of gin were forced upon him. His body, not accustomed to heavy drinking, began to react violently. His stomach contained nothing but alcohol, and his complexion turned ashen. He was unable to stand, speak, or move autonomously, teetering on the brink of dehydration and repeatedly losing consciousness. Astonishingly, all these events unfolded in a public setting. One fraternity member recounted that the second trial occurred right on the sidewalk in front of a cafe in the city square. Yet none of the bystanders intervened. They neither alerted the authorities nor called for police assistance. At 9 p.m., the third challenge commenced, aptly titled, "Endure the Night." The novices were hauled back to the dormitory, where 18 fraternity brothers resumed their relentless hazing. The task was to consume as many pints of beer as feasible. By the trial's conclusion, all 3 participants had become unconscious. They were breathing, but unresponsive to any attempts to rouse them. Remarkably, their unconscious state did not exempt them from ongoing abuse. In line with the fraternity's customs, if someone fainted at a gathering, they were urinated on, a manifestation of perceived frailty and an opportunity for others to exert dominance. Proof of these acts was captured in a video taken at 11:40 p.m., which they subsequently attempted to erase. With the first day's competition at an end, the 3 new initiates were dragged to their quarters and unceremoniously deposited on their beds. For amusement, their water supply was disabled, possessions defaced with ketchup and chocolate, and their door locked. This action meant that should any of them regain consciousness after consuming such a lethal volume of alcohol, they would remain trapped inside. They didn't even have access to water to alleviate their thirst. This was just the initial day of the initiation at one of the nation's most esteemed universities, yet the most distressing experiences were still to come. The following day, December 5th, 2018, around 10:30 a.m., the fraternity members prepared for the final stages of the grueling initiation. They woke the 3 initiates, placed them in vehicles, and drove out of the city to a secluded village roughly an hour away. A fraternity member owned a small cottage there, hidden by thick woods, an ideal location to conceal their activities. En route, they made several stops to acquire items necessary for the ceremony. The students bought aquarium fish, eels, live rodents, as well as bird and dog feed from a pet store. Next, they visited a supermarket and obtained fish sauce used in Asian cuisine for its flavor-enhancing qualities. It's high in sodium, with about 1670 milligrams per tablespoon, around 70% of the advised daily intake, and isn't typically consumed in large amounts. They also purchased duck eggs, sardines, clams, shrimp paste, mussels, among other products. During one of these stops, they encountered an academic who noticed that one of the students apparently needed assistance. She voiced her concerns to the fraternity members and even suggested calling the police. However, the students convincingly reassured her that he was merely intoxicated and in shock. They assured her that the initiation had ended and they intended to sober him up with a cold bath. Dismissing her concerns, the group proceeded to the cabin in the forest. The details of what happened next were reconstructed by police using recovered deleted video footage and scarce evidence. However, the full truth remains unclear. Over several hours, the 3 initiates were forced to dig a substantial trench into which they were subsequently placed. Struggling to keep warm, they found themselves surrounded by 18 young adult men, other fraternity members, who filled this trench with freezing water and live eels. In Belgium, in December, the average temperature varies from +3 to 7 degrees Celsius. When initiates began to cold, permanent members of the fraternity urinated on them above as a twisted way to warm them up. At this point, Sander was suffering from dehydration and remained inebriated from the previous night's events. Even if he had the will to stand and leave, his physical state made it impossible. Under normal circumstances, to formally reject the initiation process, one simply had to ring a bell placed away from the trench, therefore forfeiting their place in the fraternity. The initiates could have accessed this bell at any time. However, in this case, the bell was either intentionally or inadvertently omitted, leaving Sander without a way to signify his refusal of the initiation. His inability to stand or speak due to his condition rendered him powerless. The 3 inebriated and weary boys sat in the icy water, subjected to the senior fraternity members' acts of urination and defecation. They were then coerced into biting off the heads of live mice and eels in the water, and followed with fish oil. After enduring over 6 hours in such brutal conditions, Sander's body began shutting down, and he started losing consciousness. He was extracted from the water, clothed in dry garments, and placed beside a fire. As he curled up on the grass in a fetal position for 2 hours, initiation rites carried on around him instead of receiving medical attention. The students documented the situation with photos and videos, while Sander emitted distressing sounds indicative of excruciating pain. The excessive intake of sodium triggered severe elevation in Sander's blood pressure, resulting in a nosebleed, and he became entirely unresponsive. At 8:57 p.m., a senior fraternity member eventually decided to contact emergency services. Following their advice, students transported an unconscious Sander to a hospital but placed his body in the trunk to prevent soiling the car's interior. Upon arrival at the emergency department, fraternity members withheld crucial information regarding Sander's recent diet and alcohol consumption from the medical team. After leaving him in the care of the hospital staff, they departed with the intention of resuming the initiation upon his discharge. This action left Sander with no real chance of recovery. While the medical professionals conducted tests and endeavored to unravel the cause of his condition, Sander's organs began failing due to the severity of his state. He was transferred to Antp University Hospital for its superior facilities. At Antp University Hospital, Sander's heart ceased functioning. He slipped into a coma, and subsequently, the 20-year-old tragically lost his life. The primary cause of death was identified as toxic levels of sodium in his body, a direct result of excessive fish sauce consumption. The hospital informed the police, prompting an immediate investigation into the circumstances surrounding his death. By 10:40 p.m., the other 2 initiates who had continued with the ritual were also hospitalized. Upon learning of their children's dire condition, the parents hurried to the hospital. Meanwhile, fraternity members hastily worked to erase any evidence of the initiation. They filled in the trench used for the trials, cleaned up a room smeared with ketchup and chocolate, reinstated water supply, and purged their phones of incriminating messages, photos, and videos. By the time police arrived at the scene, there was no physical evidence left. However, investigators were later able to recover deleted data from mobile devices. Despite this recovery, significant hurdles were encountered during the investigation. The children involved belonged to influential families, whose parents quickly sought legal representation. Though evidence implicating 18 fraternity members in Sander's death grew stronger, continuous obstruction from high-powered parents protracted the investigation. All 18 students wiped their social media profiles and limited their communication, speaking only through their attorneys. Following Sander's tragic death, Rayo's fraternity was dissolved. The university imposed disciplinary measures on all involved, requiring them to complete 30 hours of community service and write an essay on tradition's role in student organizations. Remarkably, none of the participants were expelled from the university. The 18 individuals involved in the incident completed their education without significant repercussions. In response to this outcome, teachers aware of the situation authored an open letter advocating for harsher penalties for the group, but no additional measures were enforced against these students. The formal legal process concluded in July 2020. Following this, attorneys representing 2 members sought further investigations, seemingly as a tactic to reframe the entire incident as a tragic accident and attribute blame to the deceased student for purportedly weak health. It wasn't until May 26, 2023, that the Court of Appeal delivered its verdict, finding the 18 fraternity members guilty of involuntary manslaughter and degrading treatment. Each was fined €400 and sentenced to perform community service. Additionally, they were collectively ordered to pay approximately €30,000 in compensation to the family to avoid impacting their future prospects. The students' identities were withheld. The leniency of the verdict for those responsible for the death sparked widespread dissent, leading to protest actions in various cities. Despite these demonstrations, no substantial changes have been reported as a consequence in this case. The perceived lack of justice remains a poignant aspect of this story. A wealthy businesswoman, tired of solitude and possessing a significant fortune, met a charming anesthesiologist. He dreamed of finding his ideal partner, From their first encounter, there was a storm of passion between them. Not everyone, however, was pleased with the joy the eyes of this enamored pair. Deborah, the protagonist of our story, is a stylish, successful, and quite affluent woman. Her millions weren't luck. They were the result of her dedication and hard work. She spent years climbing in the interior design industry and eventually founded her own design firm, Ambrosia. Over 3 decades, Deborah poured herself into this venture with deep passion for her profession. However, her personal life didn't reflect this success. Although she married 4 times, each union ended in divorce. Despite being a devoted mother to her 4 children, her romantic relationships continually fell short. Having secured her financial future, Deborah yearned for something more essential: the simple joy of familial happiness. Her life took a significant turn due to a family tragedy several years ago when Cindy, her older sister, was killed by Billy Vickers in March 1984. During the trial, their mother testified against Cindy and supported Billy. Consequently, Vickers received a very light sentence and spent only a few years in prison for this horrible murder. Billy and Cindy had 2 kids, and this event deeply scarred them. Following this ordeal, Deborah faced extreme anxiety and developed panic attacks, fearing firearms. Living alone for an extended period didn't help. Despite friends urging her to buy a pistol for protection, she couldn't tolerate having a weapon nearby. Deborah always took great care of her appearance and surrounded herself with beautiful things. She invested considerable time and money in skincare, makeup and hair care at this point in her life. She owned a variety of stylish items, including Chanel jewelry, Cartier watches, denim clothing, and Gucci shoes. The only thing she lacked was a devoted partner. John Mayen, a central character in our narrative, was born on February 3, 1958, in California. He grew up alongside his sisters, Karen and Donna. His father, known for his deceitful and fraudulent behavior, imparted these traits to John early in life. John became involved in deceptive schemes and fraudulent activities to make a living. Additionally, he dealt in illegal substances and used them himself, which led to multiple confrontations with law enforcement and his eventual banishment from California in 1988. John completed his undergraduate studies at Arizona State University, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree. Later on, he joined the University of Dayton's law faculty. His friends nicknamed him Dirty John due to his ability to effortlessly attract women. John was notably handsome, standing around 6 feet 3 inches tall with hazel green eyes and thick dark hair. His engaging smile particularly appealed to women. After completing his academic journey, John met Tanya Sells, a nurse anesthetist by profession. They got married in November 1990 when she was 25 and he was 31. Their relationship was fundamentally based on falsehoods, as John kept Tanya isolated from his family, alleging their malevolence. Tanya supported her husband while attending medical school in Tennessee and helped him obtain his license as an anesthesiologist. The couple had 2 children. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Tanya discovered from John's mother and sisters that he had been deceiving her about his past. She also found his secret stash of pills stolen from patients in need, pills he himself was addicted to, which explained his temper. Tanya promptly reported this to the police. Following an investigation, John admitted to all charges but chose to flee the state instead of turning himself in to authorities. He took refuge in a Michigan hotel where the police easily located him. John was found unconscious, surrounded by empty pill containers, prompting them to summon an ambulance. While en route to the hospital, he regained consciousness, seized a medication vial, and leapt from the ambulance but was apprehended soon after. Subsequently, he received a 6-year prison sentence in Michigan for resisting arrest and illegal drug possession. However, remarkably, John served only 17 months behind bars. He somehow managed to have his sentence reduced and was freed in 2004. During this period of his life, he met Deborah. She was 55 and he was 59. They both decided to try online dating, which is how they eventually crossed paths. Deborah was impressed by John's online profile. He described himself as a divorced doctor and a Christian searching for love. After a series of disappointing dates, Deborah was pleasantly surprised when she met John. He showed genuine interest in her life, praised her accomplishments, and seemed different from others. Their first date happened in October 2014, at a restaurant called Houston in Irvine, California. John's aim was to captivate Deborah, and he did so by sharing fabricated tales of his past, like working with Doctors Without Borders in Iraq. He mentioned having 2 children and owning multiple properties. Deborah envisioned him as a selfless doctor, devoted to global service. John treated her like royalty, which was exactly what Deborah longed for after seeking companionship for so long. He even expressed eagerness to meet her family. His charming words made Deborah's heart flutter. After leaving the restaurant, they ended up at her penthouse. However, John overstepped boundaries that night. After a few kisses, he tried to escalate things further. Deborah felt uncomfortable with the pressure and asked him to leave. The next morning, John sought to amend his mistake. He called Deborah to apologize, explaining that he had consumed too much alcohol and couldn't contain his emotions. This admission once again raised John's standing in Deborah's eyes, leading them to continue their dates. As their relationship progressed, Deborah and John spent more time together. On their third date, John declared his love and proposed. Deborah was so delighted by their companionship that she overlooked several peculiarities about him. For instance, John consistently wore well-worn medical scrubs, even at stylish events organized by Deborah, and claimed he had no time to change into more appropriate attire. Deborah was unfazed and proudly introduced him as her doctor to friends, posing with him for photos. Their bond deepened, and soon they decided to move in together. Deborah's daughter Jacine, who lived with her in the penthouse, was forthright and critical of her mother's partners. She disapproved of John's unkempt appearance, finding it strange that her mother, usually dressed in Gucci, was involved with someone in dirty robes. Jacqueline also noticed John's peculiar interest in the penthouse's art, statues and paintings, as if he were evaluating their worth. After just 5 weeks of knowing each other, John convinced Deborah they should live separately. They rented a house for $6,500 a month on Balboa Island's waterfront in Newport. Deborah paid $80,000 up front for several months' rent, while John avoided putting his name on the lease due to tax complications. Deborah was so enamored with John that she covered all expenses herself without informing her children. She couldn't understand why they disapproved of him, as he pampered her like royalty, preparing morning coffee, doing grocery shopping, and striving to simplify her life. Deborah felt she had found her perfect match in John, and hoped that over time, her children would warm up to him. Envisioning a harmonious family future, Deborah arranged for John to meet her younger daughter Tara, who was known for having a softer disposition compared to Jacqueline. Tara resided in Las Vegas with her boyfriend, and upon hearing about John over the phone, decided to meet him in person. Tara's visit coincided with Deborah and John's move into their new residence. From their first encounter, Tara felt uneasy about John. His lack of cordiality, combined with his silent, solitary efforts in moving belongings, trying to project a tough exterior, didn't sit well with her. Despite reservations, Tara was willing to give John the benefit of the doubt, yet quickly began observing some concerning signs. John didn't own a vehicle, and although he claimed to have properties in Newport Beach and Palm Springs, he never suggested relocating or even invited them to visit. John appeared to spend most of his days at home, often engrossed in video games. Just before Thanksgiving, Tara decided to snoop through her mother's boyfriend's belongings and found a nurse's certificate with his name, realizing he was not a doctor. When John found out about this, he became furious and threw a massive tantrum. He accused Tara of trying to deprive her mother of happiness, shouting that she wouldn't succeed in separating them, while Deborah just stood there listening. Eventually, there was a big argument, and Tara left the house. John used the situation to convince Deborah that her children were only after her wealth. They were waiting for her demise, and thus didn't want to see her happy. On the eve of Thanksgiving, Deborah's mother Arlene, a very religious woman, arrived. John put on an entire religious act in front of her, but received another scandal instead of approval. The holiday ended in another fiasco. Subsequently, Deborah opted to seek guidance from a psychotherapist who recommended establishing limits with her offspring and pursuing a tranquil existence, a suggestion she embraced. She and John made Balboa Island their home, indulging in local eateries, strolling about, and relishing the picturesque views. At times, John exhibited youthful exuberance, capturing bare-chested selfies and sharing them with her, engaging in playful activities which rejuvenated her spirit. Deborah was immensely joyful, yet remained apprehensive about John's attire. His wardrobe was limited to aged medical scrubs, loose frayed trousers and worn-out shirts, whereas Deborah desired her partner to be fashionably attired and complement her way of life. John claimed his finer garments were pilfered during a stint in Iraq. Hence, Deborah escorted him on a shopping spree, acquiring a complete set of high-end designer outfits for him. In early December, John accompanied Deborah on a work-related trip to Las Vegas. By this time, their acquaintance was just under 2 months old, yet they chose to marry. Deborah concealed this development from her children. On one occasion, an unknown woman managed to enter John and Deborah's residence. John seized this incident to persuade Deborah of the need for enhanced security measures. Subsequently, he set up multiple surveillance cameras within their home, which he operated via his smartphone. He extended this surveillance to his wife's office, aiming to monitor her activities. John's objective was to exert total control over their environment. Gradually, Deborah began to inquire about his family background and previous life. For each query, John had an immediate justification or excuse. Despite noticeable inconsistencies, Deborah chose to ignore them, convinced she had met her ideal partner. However, her children remained skeptical. Jacqueline took the initiative to investigate John's activities. Since he didn't own a vehicle, he utilized Deborah's Tesla. Jacqueline installed tracking devices on the car to monitor his whereabouts, but this surveillance didn't reveal anything significant. Then she and Tara engaged a private investigator. The detectives soon returned with findings. They uncovered that John had declared bankruptcy, possessed a nursing license but not one for practicing medicine, and had resided in Arizona, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and California. One address associated with John was the Orange County Jail. When the daughters shared these discoveries with their mother, Deborah asserted that even if these facts were accurate, her affection for him would remain unchanged. In late March, a letter intended for John was received by Deborah. The sender was a former prison inmate, but she couldn't read it, as John quickly grabbed the letter from her. Initially, he accused her of mistrust with a burst of anger, then claimed it was from a pen pal whom he was supporting emotionally. Deborah felt uneasy about this explanation. The following day, with her husband away on work, she decided to sift through his belongings. This search unveiled startling truths about the man she had wed. She discovered that John was an ex-nurse anesthetist who had succumbed to an addiction to pain medication, leading to his arrest and the collapse of his professional life. Additionally, Deborah uncovered evidence of his history as a swindler. Court records revealed that John had previously cheated and stolen from numerous women. He stumbled upon some court files online. They included a search warrant for his storage unit. Inside the unit, authorities found a .38 caliber handgun, bullets, a GPS tracker, syringes, and other suspicious items. That was the moment Deborah realized John's true identity. He was a dangerous individual and an armed felon. He had several restraining orders against him from different women. Most alarmingly, she discovered he had been released from prison on October 8th and met her just days later. Feeling overwhelmed by these revelations, Deborah examined the documents meticulously. She felt both shocked and scared. She realized the potential danger John posed to her and her children. Choosing to act normal temporarily, Deborah waited for the right moment. When John left for the hospital due to back issues, she seized the opportunity. With her family's help, she moved out during his absence. During the packing process, they found more documents belonging to John. These were prints of online comments from other women warning about him. They described John as persuasive and adept at deception. They cautioned others not to be swayed by his attractiveness and charm. Convinced of his instability, Deborah decided to end their relationship and leave. Despite her decision, John kept messaging her, pleading for her to visit him in the hospital. Overcome with guilt, Deborah relented. By June 2015, John had successfully persuaded Deborah to reconcile with him. He offered many justifications for the oddities found among his possessions. He admitted he had hidden his past because he believed a woman like her wouldn't have noticed him otherwise. For this reason, he pretended to be a doctor to impress her, and now implored her help in rehabilitating and salvaging his life. Still enamored with him, Deborah granted him another chance. They relocated together to a new apartment in Irvine. However, this decision deeply troubled her children, leading the couple to maintain some distance from them temporarily. By March 2016, the couple had been married for a year already. For 3 months, Deborah helped John recover from his addiction. However, she was deeply distressed because her entire family disliked him, especially Jacine. This animosity was mutual. Matters escalated to the point where her husband forbade Deborah from seeing her daughter. When John discovered that Deborah was paying for Jacqueline's real estate lessons, he reacted spitefully. He called the school to slander Jacqueline in front of her teachers and wrote her threatening and indecent messages, insisting that her mother no longer wanted anything to do with her. He even threatened that one day he would come and harm Jacqueline. It became evident that while John appeared to be recovering, his malevolence and cruelty were intensifying. By April 2016, Deborah's patience had reached its limit, prompting her to file for divorce. She sought a peaceful dissolution of the relationship and began gradually withdrawing money from her bank account for safekeeping. Unfortunately, she kept $30,000 in a hiding place in one of the lower drawers at home. When John discovered this money, he asserted that it belonged to him as well. Realizing that divorce proceedings were imminent, John started showing more aggression. Sensing the danger, Deborah knew it was time to flee. She took some cosmetics and work items and moved to Jacqueline's apartment in Irvine, a location she felt safe due to numerous surveillance cameras around the complex. Deborah attempted to obtain a restraining order. However, the Orange County judge denied her request since there was no immediate threat. John lived in another state and hadn't made any direct recent moves against her. With little recourse, she focused on breaking off the relationship and moving on. After the separation, John relocated to one of Deborah's properties in Nevada. He repeatedly tried contacting her, but she consistently ignored his calls. Then things took a drastic turn on June 11, 2016. That day, as Deborah drove her Jaguar to work, an alarming incident occurred. Her car was stolen from the parking lot while she was at the office. The vehicle was soon found only about a block and a half away, drenched in gasoline, but not set on fire, resulting in only minor damage. Security footage from the area clearly identified John Mayan as responsible for the theft attempt, a stark reminder of his continued threat and volatility despite living in another state. On the evening of August 20, 2016, Tara came home from work and parked in the lot. As she got out of her car, John suddenly appeared. He attacked her with a knife, trying to drag her back into the vehicle, screamed for help during the struggle. When John covered her mouth, she bit him hard. A fierce struggle erupted right there in the parking lot. Tara, wearing heavy boots, managed to kick her assailant and knock the knife from his grasp. Seeing a chance, she grabbed the knife and repeatedly stabbed John. She delivered 13 wounds, with the last stab piercing his eye. Trembling with shock, Tara was fortunate that a neighbor saw her and came to help with a towel for her injuries. The neighbor also called the police. John was still alive when paramedics arrived. They found he had a pulse. In John's car, authorities discovered duct tape, cable ties, kitchen knives, and a passport. This indicated he might have planned to abduct Tara and leave the city with her as a hostage. John Mayan was taken to the hospital but died 4 days later at age 57. His remains were cremated and no memorial service was held, as he was universally disliked by those who knew him. Deborah and her children were deeply traumatized by the entire incident. It took some time for Deborah to return to normal life, but she still struggles with guilt for bringing a criminal into their family. Now, Deborah has become very cautious. She carries a stun gun and pepper spray at all times for protection. She has stated that she would never meet someone online again based on this experience. When Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, first encountered Catherine Pileggi, a flight attendant, he felt an immediate sense of love. Little did he know their chance meeting in the skies would ultimately shape their future. Born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Ronald Vinci displayed an entrepreneurial spirit from an early age. In his 20s, he started his first business venture by renting a space on the Pacific Coast in San Diego to sell Honda motorcycles. Over time, his small shop grew into one of California's largest Honda dealerships. Ron's success didn't stop there. He opened several more car dealerships, steadily increasing his earnings. Those who worked for Vinci often described him as resolute and strong-willed, as well as a demanding employer. Ronald Vinci's personal life included a previous marriage to Pamela. Together they had a son named Carrie. However, their marriage ended in divorce after several years. Following his divorce, Ron indulged in a lavish lifestyle and spent his wealth on extravagant toys. He developed a passion for collecting airplanes and helicopters, even acquiring a large hangar to house his collection. Ronald resided in a spacious house located in Rancho Santa Fe, California. He went to great lengths to obtain permission from the county commission to construct a helicopter pad on his property, despite objections from neighbors. This allowed him to commute conveniently by helicopter directly from home. Additionally, helicopter pads were installed on the roofs of his car dealerships to further facilitate aerial transportation. In 1990, the paths of 50-year-old Ronald Vinci and 34-year-old Catherine Pileggi crossed unexpectedly in the skies. Catherine was working as a flight attendant when they first met. Catherine Pileggi hailed from a close-knit family and grew up in rural Georgia. During her youth, she participated in beauty pageants and won hearts with her charm and grace. With charisma and a radiant smile, her beauty and pleasant demeanor attracted many admirers and suitors. After finishing her education, Catherine spent several years working as a lab technician in a veterans hospital. However, her aspirations were beyond this job, and she always yearned for more in life. In 1980, Catherine made a significant career change by leaving the hospital and joining Delta Airlines as a flight attendant. At that time, her annual income was $20,000. She enjoyed her new job, tending to passengers' needs and serving meals. Catherine even had some practical knowledge, like using coffee grounds to eliminate unpleasant odors, a handy tip for dealing with spills on airplane seats. In 1990, a decade after starting her flight attendant career, Catherine had a fateful encounter on a flight. She met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, who was immediately drawn to her charming and ever-smiling personality. Despite the significant 14-year age gap between them, the two began a romantic relationship. Catherine then left her career as a flight attendant and moved into Ronald's luxurious home in California. They shared a passion for travel, often visiting Aspen, Colorado, a favorite getaway spot for them. Their relationship spanned 10 years, during which Ronald never proposed to Catherine. Eventually, they chose to part ways. Seeking a fresh start and new companionship, Catherine relocated to Florida in April 2001 at the age of 45. She began a relationship with 63-year-old Dilio Carano, an insurance agent who was financially well off. The couple met through mutual friends. Catherine confided in Dilio about her previous relationship with Ronald Vinci, describing it as tumultuous and unhappy. She revealed that during the decade-long relationship with Ronald, she endured insults from him and had to deal with his heavy drinking and public discussions of his affairs with other women, all while hoping for a marriage proposal that never came from Ronald Vinci. On the contrary, wasted no time and swiftly proposed to Catherine. The couple tied the knot in May 2001, just a month after they first met. Catherine seemed very happy with the marriage. After their wedding, they began living together in Miami Beach, Florida. Dilio described Catherine's early demeanor in their shared life as resembling that of a domestic cat, gentle, calm, and quiet, with minimal eating habits. Furthermore, Catherine had a profound fear of water. She couldn't bathe in the ocean or river without experiencing intense anxiety upon entering the water. A few months into their marriage, Dilio began to notice a significant change in his wife's behavior. She increasingly requested money from him, demanding funds for clothes and gifts, while comparing him to her friends' more generous husbands. Dilio estimated that Catherine was withdrawing approximately $55,000 monthly from him. She used educational expenses as an excuse, but failed to provide receipts or evidence of such expenditures. After several months of enduring this financial strain, Dilio decided he had rushed into the marriage and wanted a divorce. Given their lack of children or shared property, the separation was relatively straightforward. Court documents revealed that Dilio Carano had a net worth of $4.5 million, whereas Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine prepared to move out of Dilio's house, she expressed sadness and despair, lamenting, "What's the point of living? I don't succeed in anything. There's just no meaning in my life." In 2005, Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, made a significant life change by relocating to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Convinced by friends that Florida offered favorable climate conditions and low taxes, at this point, Ron had already sold his car dealerships and accumulated substantial wealth. In Fort Lauderdale, he acquired a luxurious apartment on the 4th floor, enjoying his new residence's comforts. In the same year, Ronald rekindled his relationship with Catherine Pileggi. Catherine, the flight attendant Ron had previously dated, moved into his apartment, rekindling their relationship. Interestingly, Catherine's ex-husband, Dilio Carano, also lived in the same building, but was situated 30 floors below them. Dilio couldn't comprehend why Catherine chose to reconnect with the millionaire she once described as a monster. As their relationship progressed, Catherine became increasingly fixated on marrying Ron. Both Ronald and Catherine were no longer working and led a leisurely lifestyle. Their differences became more evident over time. Ronald was overweight and enjoyed indulging in rich foods. In contrast, Catherine maintained a weight of only 42 kilograms by eating sparingly. Ronald loved lively parties, while Catherine preferred staying home absorbed in crime stories. She rarely wore dresses, opting for shorts and sneakers instead. The couple often traveled together, crossing the sea by boat and visiting Caribbean islands by air. Despite her fear of the ocean, detailed in her diary entries, Ron incessantly encouraged her to conquer her phobia. Even though Ronald possessed considerable wealth, he had a penchant for frequenting budget-friendly bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront with friends. There, he would order 1 tacos and strong drinks. He might have been the life of these gatherings, flirting with women, but he often humorously remarked that his appeal to men had long vanished. Their home frequently hosted gatherings where Ronald indulged in alcohol and grew more outspoken. Occasionally, he publicly insulted Catherine in front of their friends, implying she owed everything to him. At these events, Catherine usually played a passive role, quietly catering to Ronald's intoxicated demands, serving drinks and snacks and attending to his friends' needs. This dynamic painted a clearer picture of their contrasting personalities and relationship intricacies, Ron's extroverted indulgence versus Catherine's introverted submissiveness. For 5 years, this pattern persisted. However, the millionaire remained hesitant to propose marriage to Catherine. By 2010, Ronald began confiding in friends about his desire to end the e-killing and seek a younger companion. In early 2011, Ronald Vinci found himself hospitalized due to severe intestinal issues. These issues were most likely stemming from years of alcohol abuse. The doctors attributed his illness to alcohol consumption, but Vinci noted a recent shift in the taste of his food. A friend jokingly suggested that maybe Catherine had tried to poison him. Ronald dismissed this jest without much thought. In reality, Ronald had neglected his health. His excessive alcohol intake and the habit of consuming numerous pills for relaxation and better sleep were taking a toll on his well-being. In June 2011, Ronald Vinci made a significant purchase, acquiring a new waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale, valued at $3 million. Conveniently located just steps away from where his yacht was docked, the property promised comfort. At the age of 70, Ronald looked forward to spending the rest of his life in this residence. He eagerly anticipated visits from his only son, Carrie, and his grandson. Carrie's occupation as a waiter was a subject of jest for Ronald, who humorously claimed that Carrie was eagerly anticipating his father's passing. On the afternoon of June 28, 2011, the gardener of Ronald Vinci made a distressing call to 911, reporting an incident involving his employer. When the police arrived at the scene, they discovered the lifeless body of the millionaire in a guest bedroom. Shockingly, his body had been meticulously wrapped in plastic bags, tightly taped, and placed inside a sleeping bag along with soiled sheets. And on top of it all was a substance resembling wet dirt, later identified as coffee grounds. Further examination revealed a slashed mattress beneath the blanket on the bed. The gardener informed the police that according to Catherine Pileggi, Ronald had fallen down the stairs, suffered a head injury, and subsequently passed away. The officers had deep suspicions that Ronald Vinci's death was not accidental. During police interrogation, the gardener provided a chilling account of the events leading up to the discovery of Vinci's lifeless body. According to his testimony, Catherine Pileggi had called him late at night, urgently requesting his presence at Vinci's residence. Upon his arrival in the morning, he was confronted with the sight of the millionaire's body wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag in one of the guest bedrooms. Catherine, distressed and tearful, implored the gardener to assist her in burying Ron. She revealed that Vinci had expressed a lifelong wish to be laid to rest in the ocean after his demise. To carry out this plan, she had purchased a blue container intended to hold Vinci's body, with the intention of taking it out to sea using the millionaire's yacht. By the time the gardener alerted authorities, Catherine had already brought this container home and placed it in the garage. Upon conducting a thorough examination, the medical examiner made gruesome findings. Ronald Vinci, aged 70, had sustained 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck. He bore marks consistent with hammer blows on his head and had ultimately met his demise from a gunshot wound to the head. On June 27th evening, Ronald Vinci's friends visited his house. Catherine prepared the meal and Ron provided drinks during their gathering. During dinner, Ron mentioned that his passport and one of his pistols were missing. He also complained that the food tasted unusually bitter. Unexpectedly, Ron, who was known for staying up late, said he wasn't feeling well and went to bed as early as 7:30 p.m., an unusual time for him. His friends eventually found this early bedtime odd and left his house afterward. Catherine Pileggi, aged 54, was brought in for questioning a few hours later, where she provided a detailed confession. She recounted events around 1 a.m., shedding light on what transpired that fateful night. On June 28th, a drunk Ronald Vinci woke up and began verbally insulting Catherine. The situation escalated as he chased her down the stairs, stumbled and fell, hitting his head severely. Catherine claimed she helped him up and guided him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. Afterward, she cleaned the bloodstains on the stairs. A few hours later, she entered the guest bedroom to check on Ron, finding him asleep with a loaded gun on the nightstand. Fearing that Vinci intended to kill her, Catherine acted out of fear and desperation. She grabbed the gun and fatally shot him in the head. During interrogation, Catherine admitted she was very scared and angrier than she had ever been before, feeling like her soul had left her body. After the shooting, she inflicted numerous additional wounds on Ron using a knife and a hammer. Catherine then wrapped his body in a bag and attempted to conceal the evidence by calling the gardener when she realized she couldn't dispose of the body alone. Surveillance camera photos showed Catherine purchasing a large blue container at a hardware store after the murder. This container was intended to be used for disposing of Ronald's body in the ocean. Authorities discovered a gun matching the one used to shoot Ronald in Catherine's car with her fingerprints on it. Her Bentley also contained incriminating items such as a knife, cut-up pieces of a mattress, clothing, and rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Consequently, Catherine faced a charge of first-degree murder and was subsequently arrested and detained. Further investigations revealed that just a month before the murder in May, Catherine had been involved in a legal dispute wherein her sister accused her of borrowing money but refusing to repay it. Catherine defended herself by claiming that the money was a gift and therefore refused to return it to her sister. On May 17th, the court ruled in favor of Catherine in this dispute. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams from Vinci's house on the night of the crime. Additionally, a witness spotted a white car with a large trailer near Vinci's home early in the morning. This car belonged to the gardener. Ronald Vinci's friends disclosed that he had been contemplating ending his relationship with Catherine for quite some time. The couple had not been intimate for several months and even slept in separate rooms within their large house. Just a few weeks before the tragedy, attempted to give Catherine $1 million through one of his workers, requesting her to leave his house permanently. Prosecutors believed that Catherine's primary motive was the fear of losing her wealthy partner. However, Catherine's defense argued that she had been a victim of severe abuse during her relationship with Ronald and acted in self-defense. Questions arose regarding why she did not immediately contact the police, why she did not tell the truth right away, and why she endured the alleged abuse for years without leaving him. Some of Catherine's relatives defended her in court, and a court psychiatrist identified some signs of domestic violence. Nonetheless, none of Ronald's close associates could confirm witnessing any mistreatment in their relationship. They described Catherine as calm and noted that she never complained about her life. During the court proceedings, Catherine made a startling accusation against Ronald Vinci, claiming he was responsible for the sudden death of her younger sister Angela 3 years prior, in December 2009. Catherine, Ronald and Angela had embarked on a Caribbean cruise together. Angela had been struggling with substance abuse issues and consumed excessive alcohol during a party on the cruise, leading to severe illness and intense convulsions. In an effort to help her sister, Catherine performed artificial respiration. Tragically, Angela's heart stopped beating, resulting in her death. It later emerged that Ronald had provided Angela with some pills on the evening of the cruise, presumably to help her relax. Catherine firmly believed these pills were a contributing factor in her younger sister's death. In 2014, a jury found Catherine PGI guilty of the murder of Ronald Vinci. Consequently, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the LEL Correctional Institution in Marin County, Florida. Her potential release date is set for January 2034, when she will be 77 years old. The story of successful and wealthy Ronald Vinci took a tragic turn due to his ill-fated relationship with quiet and unassuming flight attendant Catherine PGI. Despite his many wise decisions in life, this particular relationship ultimately proved to be a fatal error for the millionaire. In the early hours of August 2nd, 2015, precisely at 3 a.m., an urgent call was made to 911. Tom Martins, an older gentleman, reported in a frantic tone that his son-in-law, Jason Corbett, had assaulted his daughter, Molly. To protect her, Tom intervened and struck Jason on the head with a baseball bat. He mentioned Jason was bleeding heavily and might already be deceased. He urgently requested an ambulance to their location. Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old businessman from Limerick, Ireland, was known for his cheerful and kind personality. He had a twin brother named Wayne and a sister named Tracy. In 2003, at the age of 27, Jason married Margaret Fitzpatrick. They soon welcomed a son named Jack and a daughter named Sarah. Their family life appeared idyllic in Ireland until tragedy struck. In 2006, not long after Sarah's birth, Margaret experienced a severe asthma attack in the middle of the night. She woke Jason up, struggling to breathe. Despite Jason's efforts to help with medication and an inhaler, her condition deteriorated. In desperation, he called for an ambulance. However, Margaret sadly passed away en route to the hospital. At just 30 years old and serving as the director of a small packaging company in Ireland, Jason was left to raise their children, his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter, alone. His friends noted his profound sadness and struggle following this loss. A year after Margaret's passing, Jason sought help with childcare and housekeeping duties. This led him to hire Molly Martins, a 25-year-old American woman. Molly arrived in Ireland from the United States in March 2008. A longtime friend of Jason's met her at the airport, but immediately harbored reservations about her suitability for the role of nanny and housekeeper. Molly appeared much younger than her age suggested and had a rather flamboyant style, sporting a bright coat with a fur collar, along with cowboy boots and heavy makeup. To this friend, she seemed more like someone out of theater than fitting for such significant responsibilities. Molly Martins grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. She left Clemson University and decided to start afresh in Ireland. Molly quickly formed a strong bond with Jason's son and daughter, showing tenderness and care. Soon, Jason's close friends noticed a change. He was gradually healing after the loss of his first wife, appearing more lively and engaged. Feelings blossomed between Jason and Molly, leading to a romantic relationship. The couple, along with Jack and Sarah, enjoyed a vacation together. They had a wonderful time, growing closer while planning their future life. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason invited Molly to a cafe where he proposed with a ring. Overjoyed, Molly began planning their wedding in America. She persuaded Jason to move to her home country, and he agreed. In 2011, Jason sold his house and relocated his job to the United States. The family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina, where Jason and Molly married in a ceremony attended by many relatives and friends from both America and Ireland. After their marriage, Molly worked as a swimming instructor, but mainly focused on caring for Jack and Sarah. Meanwhile, Jason held a managerial position in the United States. Initially happy, their marital relationship eventually began to deteriorate. This growing tension peaked on August 1, 2015, when Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited the Corbett family's home at around 11 p.m. Jason welcomed them in the driveway and helped with their luggage. Tom brought a baseball bat as a gift for Jack, Jason's son, who was out at a party with friends at the time. That evening, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had dinner together. They opted for pizza. Jack returned home close to midnight. However, Tom decided not to give him the baseball bat at such an hour, but intended to present it later instead. The following morning, after 11 p.m., the family retired for the night. Molly and Jason slept in the master bedroom on the first floor, with the children, Jack and Sarah, in adjacent rooms. Molly's parents were accommodated in the guest room on the second floor. In the early of August 2nd, around 3 a.m., Tom Martins called 911. He claimed that his son-in-law, Jason, had attacked Molly and that he had struck Jason with a baseball bat in response. Tom urgently requested assistance, unsure of Jason's condition, who lay unconscious and bleeding. The 911 dispatcher guided Tom and Molly through cardiopulmonary resuscitation procedures in an effort to revive Jason before medical help arrived. When police and ambulance services arrived 10 minutes later, they found Molly outside near a car, appearing distraught and in shock, but without actual tears. Inside, they discovered the lifeless body of 39-year-old Jason Corbett in the main bedroom. Blood spattered across the bed, walls and floor. Both Tom's and Molly's clothing bore bloodstains while blood marked Jason's body. Near Jason lay a baseball bat and a large cobblestone, both with traces of blood, as well as an overturned lamp. Throughout this ordeal, Jack and Sarah remained asleep in their rooms. Tom and Molly did not deny their involvement in Jason's death, asserting it was self-defense. They were taken to the station for questioning. At the police station, 66-year-old Tom Martins, an FBI veteran with 30 years of experience, stated that his son-in-law was insane and constantly tormented his daughter. According to Tom, Jason was drunk that evening. Everyone went to bed, but Tom woke up at night because he heard screams and loud voices on the first floor of the house. He jumped out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and ran downstairs. Tom entered the main bedroom and saw Jason holding Molly by the throat with both hands. He yelled at Jason to let her go, to which Jason turned to him and said he would kill her. Tom claimed his protective instincts kicked in instantly, so he hit Jason with the baseball bat, but noted that their forces were unequal. Jason didn't appear to feel the blow as he tried to drag Molly into the bathroom and shut the door. However, Tom intervened. Jason pushed the elderly man, making him fall and causing his glasses to fly off. Tom confessed that at that moment, he believed he was going to be. Jason spotted the bat on the floor and reached for it. At that point, Molly grabbed a stone and shouted, "Don't touch my dad." Then, she struck her husband on the head with all her might. Following that, Tom seized the baseball bat and began hitting Jason until he fell to the floor. During questioning, 32-year-old Molly Corbett recounted the same story to investigators. She explained that her daughter Sarah woke up during the night screaming from night terrors. This woke Jason, who became very angry and lashed out at his wife. He started strangling her, threatening to kill her. Her father came to Molly's aid. Molly admitted hitting her husband on the head with a heavy stone to save her father. When asked where she got the stone, Molly replied that it had been on her bedside table. They had planned to paint cobblestones with their children for decorating flower beds with colorful stones. The woman couldn't recall how many times she hit her husband. She only mentioned it was a desperate fight for survival. Midway through the interrogation, Molly expressed enduring pain from being choked by her husband. Investigators photographed her neck, which bore a red mark in its center. Later, police compared these photos with those taken during her arrest and found no red marks on Molly's neck at detention time. She confessed that while there had been a fight between herself and her husband the day before the tragedy, it was then when Jason grabbed her by the arms and neck. Throughout questioning, she frequently complained of throat pain. Both Tom and Molly claimed in unison that Jason Corbett had been treating his wife brutally. However, his family provided conflicting accounts. Tracy Lynch, Jason Corbett's sister, shared insights about what she described as an unusual relationship between them. Dynamics observed during Jason's wedding to Molly indicated Molly exerted considerable control over Jason, often becoming upset if things didn't align with her expectations. Her reluctance to interact with Jason's visiting relatives raised further concerns. Additional alarm was added by the revelation of one of Molly's friends. This friend stated that Molly told everyone she had been friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until Margaret died of cancer. This contradicted family reports, as everyone knew she had died of an asthma attack. Despite these red flags and attempts by Jason's family and friends to dissuade him from marrying Molly due to her odd behavior, the wedding proceeded. This event marked the beginning of a complicated and troubled union. Initially, Molly and Jason Corbett's marriage appeared harmonious. Molly formed a close bond with Jason's children, Jack and Sarah, treating them as her own. However, as their first wedding anniversary approached in 2012, Jason expressed a desire to return to Ireland, his homeland, citing unhappiness in a foreign country. This disclosure marked the beginning of a decline in the couple's relationship. Despite Jack and Sarah referring to Molly as their mother, Jason resisted Molly's intentions to legally adopt them. He wanted to preserve the memory of their biological mother. During this period, Molly's behavior started to change noticeably. Jason grew increasingly concerned about her mental well-being, suspecting she might have a psychological disorder. He observed a stark contrast between her initially sweet demeanor and subsequent behavior, which he perceived as more manipulative and controlling. Molly began isolating Jason from his family, often curtailing his phone conversations with them to mere seconds. Following the untimely death of his first wife, Jason Corbett designated his sister, Tracy Lynch, as the legal guardian for his children, Jack and Sarah. In the event of his own demise, Tracy was well aware that if something to Jason, Molly would strongly contest the custody of the children. When Jason passed away, Tracy promptly traveled to North Carolina to file for custody, anticipating a legal battle with Molly, who also sought custody rights. During their strained marriage, Molly had sought legal counsel to understand her rights over Jason's children in the event of a divorce. Her lawyer advised her to document their disputes and accumulate incriminating evidence against Jason. Consequently, Molly began secretly recording their conversations. In these recordings, Molly appeared disengaged, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions while he escalated his voice. A close friend of Molly's disclosed that although Molly rarely discussed her marital issues, she began to express negative sentiments about Jason following his death. Molly confided in her friend that Jason was domineering and abusive. She accused him of forcing her into intimate acts, verbally abusing her, and progressively worsening in his treatment towards her. Despite these allegations, Molly did not report these incidents to the authorities. 4 days after Jason Corbett's tragic demise, his children Jack and Sarah, aged 10 and 8, were interviewed by a child welfare professional. In this interview, they shared observations about the relationship between their parents. Notably, they mentioned their mother Molly being cautious about not waking their father Jason, fearing it might anger him. Jack specifically talked about a cobblestone kept on the bedside table. He clarified that they had brought the stone inside due to rain, intending to decorate it later. Regarding their parents' interactions, both Jack and Sarah described incidents where they witnessed physical altercations initiated by their father against Molly. They recounted occasions where Jason physically assaulted Molly, including hitting and pushing her, and frequently snapping at her over minor issues. Subsequent to these revelations, Jack and Sarah were temporarily placed under the care of their biological relatives. Aunt Tracy Lynch, who had traveled from Ireland, stayed in a North Carolina hotel during the unfolding custody battle. By the time Jason Corbett's autopsy was completed, it revealed the grim details of his demise. The cause of death was a traumatic brain injury. Jason had suffered approximately 12 strikes to the head with both a baseball bat and a brick. These blows were concentrated on the same area, leading to his scalp being severely torn from his skull and his skull itself being fractured. Notably, the medical examiner concluded that at least one of these strikes was inflicted after Jason had already passed away. The toxicology report provided additional insights. It indicated that Jason's blood contained slightly higher than normal levels of alcohol. Additionally, traces of trazodone, an antidepressant medication commonly prescribed for insomnia, were also found in his system. Jason Corbett was laid to rest in his hometown Limerick, Ireland, alongside his first wife, Margaret. Their shared tombstone is adorned with a wedding photograph, serving as a poignant reminder of their lives and the bond they shared. 16 days after Jason Corbett's passing, his sister Tracy Lynch took his children Jack and Sarah to Ireland, separating them from their stepmother Molly. Molly was left in a state of shock and despair upon discovering that Jack and Sarah had been taken to another country. She attempted to reach out to them through phone calls and social media posts, hoping these messages would somehow reach the children. Meanwhile, Molly and Tom consistently maintained that their actions against Jason were in self-defense. However, the investigation into Jason's death was ongoing. Tracy Lynch believed in a different motive. She speculated that Molly was aware of Jason's plans to leave her and take their children with him. Tracy surmised that on the night of the incident, Jason had informed Molly of his decision. Out of fear and loneliness, Molly reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah received psychological support and gradually adapted to their new environment 9 months after their father's tragic demise. They admitted they had been coerced into lying about the alleged domestic violence at home. They revealed that Molly had manipulated them into fabricating stories about their father's behavior, threatening them with the loss of contact with her if they refused to comply. Contrary to their earlier statements, the children clarified that their father had never been abusive toward Molly. During the course of the inquiry, investigators discovered Molly Corbett's past connection with her ex-partner, Keith Magan. He provided several insightful details regarding her earlier life. Keith and Molly initially connected through a dating website, quickly falling for each other at their first meeting. They moved in together just 6 weeks later. Keith acknowledged Molly's independent spirit, jovial nature, and unique personality. However, she eventually disclosed her struggle with bipolar disorder to him. Keith wasn't overly worried about this revelation since Molly was on medication and generally stable, except for occasional shifts in behavior when she missed her doses. She wasn't violent or prone to outbursts, but would insist on not letting Keith leave during disputes. Molly often spent extended periods in the bathtub, then sat on the cold floor weeping. Despite these challenges, they continued their lives together without plans for children. Molly informed Keith she was on contraceptives, but unexpectedly declared they were expecting a child. At this point, Keith, the family's sole earner, faced financial strain and felt unprepared for parenthood. His discovery of an unopened pack of contraceptives in Molly's wardrobe led him to realize her deceit. Yet Keith, being an honorable man, proposed to Molly, who accepted joyfully. Undeterred by her health issues, she maintained her regimen of antidepressants and other medications, sometimes taking up to 16 pills daily, which caused Keith concern for their unborn child's well-being. Molly once dreamt of losing the baby, and tragically, the following day, the hospital confirmed the fetus's demise. This incident further strained their relationship. Molly plunged into profound mourning and was diagnosed with severe depression, as documented in her medical records. Her parents began supporting her more fervently and, simultaneously, developed a disdainful view of Keith, casting him as the antagonist. In early 2008, Molly informed her fiancé of her plan to go to Europe to find work as a nanny or house assistant. By March, she packed her belongings and left the apartment she had been renting with her fiancé. 10 days later, Molly called Keith to tell him she was in Ireland, had found a job, and everything was fine. From that point on, they never spoke or saw each other again. Keith Magan first heard from a North Carolina detective in October 2015 via email. Through this communication, he discovered the unfortunate events that had unfolded. It was revealed that Molly had kept her significant relationship engagement and subsequent departure to another country a secret from everyone. Keith admitted that upon viewing an interview featuring Tom and Molly, in which they portrayed the late Justin Corbett as malevolent and dreadful, he found their story unconvincing and, moreover, perceived their expressions as merely facades. In January 2016, half a year following Jason's demise, Tom and Molly were unexpectedly indicted for second-degree murder. By July 2017, 2 years since the incident, the father and daughter duo faced their trial together. They maintained their stance of having acted in self-defense in Jason's killing. During the trial, Tom Martin claimed his actions were what any true father would do: protect his daughter. He believed it was a life-or-death situation and did all he could to safeguard both Molly and himself. Tom confessed he was the one who struck Jason with a bat, ceasing only when he felt sure Jason no longer posed a threat. The prosecution contended in court that the severity of the blows indicated deep-seated animosity, not mere self-defense. An expert analyzing the bloodstains deduced that some strikes were dealt when Jason's head was 30 to 50 centimeters off the ground, strongly suggesting Tom continued to strike him even when he was down and no threat. Bloodstains on Molly's pajama bottom suggested she was close to Jason during these blows. A long, light-colored hair, possibly Molly's, was found in John's hand, but it wasn't tested. The autopsy revealed defensive wounds on John's left hand, but none on his right. This is significant because he might have used his right hand to grab Molly by the throat. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young, assigned to document injuries on Tom and Molly the night of the incident, took the stand. He recalled noticing self-inflicted marks on Molly's neck. Lieutenant Young repeatedly told her to stop and noted that except for dried blood on her cheek, forehead, and hair, she had no other injuries. Similarly, Tom had no injuries on the front of his shirt, but blood was found on his watch dial and under his fingernails. His glasses remained intact. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also testified. When she arrived at the scene and examined Jason's body, she found his torso already cold with patches of dried blood. This contradicted Molly's claim that they had immediately called 911 after Jason lost consciousness and collapsed. The trial further revealed that Jason Corbett had a life insurance policy, naming Molly as the beneficiary. It was also disclosed that Jason often sent money to Molly's parents during his lifetime. For instance, in 2011, he sent $50,000 to Tom, supposedly for wedding expenses. A neighbor came forward during the trial, recounting how he and Jason spent an evening together drinking beer from about 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. The neighbor described Jason as very relaxed and noted Jason's calm interactions with his in-laws when they arrived at the Corbett residence. He witnessed Tom and his wife arriving with Jason, welcoming them and helping carry heavy bags from their car into the house. Finally, a nurse testified about her observations of the couple before this incident occurred. The tragic event unfolded when it was reported that trazodone had been prescribed to Molly a few days before the incident on July 30, 2015. Jason had visited the hospital 2 weeks prior to his passing, expressing concerns about frequent dizziness, tension, and unprovoked anger. After 9 days filled with witness accounts, debates, and distressing crime scene photographs, the jury reached a verdict in merely 3 hours. Molly Corbett and her father, Tom Martins, were convicted of second-degree murder and received sentences of 20 and 25 years in prison, respectively. Upon hearing the verdict, Molly turned to her mother with regret in her voice, stating, "I'm so sorry, but I shouldn't have let him kill me." While it seemed justice had been served for the convicted individuals, the case was far from over. Just an hour after the jury delivered their verdict, a juror disclosed outside the courthouse that discussions about Jason Corbett's case occurred prior to the formal deliberation period. This was a significant breach of legal protocol. In light of this revelation, the defense swiftly submitted a request to overturn the conviction due to juror misconduct. However, this motion was dismissed by the trial court judge. A year later, the defense approached the appellate court, highlighting several investigative errors. One issue raised concerned blood stains on Tom Martin's shorts. The prosecution had suggested these stains belonged to Jason's blood, implying Tom stood over Jason during the assault, but they were never actually tested. The prosecutor argued it was impractical and unnecessary to test every single blood spot. The defense also underscored initial statements made by Jack and Sarah. They initially claimed their father was abusive towards them. Molly and expressed fear of him. The defense argued that the siblings' late attractions, were they to lying, were influenced by professionals, assuring them to change their testimony. On 4th, 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals determined Tom Martins and Molly Corbett should be granted a new trial. This decision was later upheld by the Supreme Court of North Carolina. Subsequently, both were released on a $200,000 bond. While awaiting the retrial, they were required to hand over their passports and were forbidden from making any contact with Jack and Sarah. Currently, Jason Corbett's case has been moved to Forsyth County, North Carolina, for additional legal proceedings, marking a minor triumph for Tom and Molly. Jason's children, Jack and Sarah, are now residing with their biological aunt in Ireland. Sarah, aged 16, has authored a series of books aimed at helping others deal with the loss of parents. Tracy Lynch, Jason's sister, has also penned a book about her brother during these years of legal battles. She aims to share the kindness and decency of Jason Corbett with the world. A notable excerpt from Tracy's book reads, "Deep down, I smile when I realize that Jason has finally returned to the only place on this earth